Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm calling to order this meeting of the Planning and Development Council of the Town of Oakville. And we have regrets from Councillor Hutchins. And we need to know if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest. I see none. Would two of you be good enough to move and second Committee of the Whole? Councillor Robinson and Councillor Lischina, thank you. All in favor? That's carried. Committee of the Whole is a method of meeting where our rules are slightly relaxed in order to encourage public participation. And one of the things the public might notice is that there's not a seconder required for motions, only a mover. And then at the end of that session, we rise back into the council form and finish the meeting. On our discussion tonight, on our agenda tonight, the first thing I'd like to call everybody's attention to is an update on the Ontario Provincial Legislature's Bill 139, which abolished the Ontario Municipal Board. And we have with us tonight the Member of Provincial Parliament, Kevin Flynn, who is going to give us a verbal report on that. Kevin, I welcome you to the center podium, and we look forward to your information.
It's great. Thank you, Worship, and thank you to the members of Council for allowing me to be here today. As you will know, before I went down to Queen's Park, I sat in some of your seats, Nick Hutchins' seat, to be perfectly clear. And I know that from time to time you're called to make some very important planning decisions. And sometimes those decisions are decisions of the magnitude that can actually affect the entire future of the town. It can change the town in some very significant ways. And I know along the way, certainly when I was first elected in my 20s, one of the impediments to what I thought was good local democracy was the existence of the Ontario Municipal Board. It seemed like the elected officials would make a decision based on the planning rules of the day, and by hook or by crook or by just pure process, those decisions would end up before some unelected people, and the whole decision would be revisited. Sometimes it felt like the council hadn't dealt with it at all, or hadn't been allowed to deal with it in the way that it should have dealt with it in the fullness of time. So over the years, there's been a number of attempts to reform the Ontario Municipal Board. There were a number of people, myself included, that thought the best thing would be to abolish it. There were those people who also said, well, that's fine to abolish it, but what do you replace it with? Where do you go next? What is the appeal body, either for the citizens or for the proponent? And the solution to that seemed to elude government after government, and it doesn't matter what political stripe you were. Trying to deal with that issue was a tough one. Our government down at Queen's Park made some attempts at reform that I think improved the situation, but probably didn't get it to the point where local elected officials and councils like yourself really wanted it to be. The leadership that was shown by Mayor Burton, certainly in the last go-around, was something that I think had a significant impact on the way that the last OMB reform was dealt with. So I'm here today to tell you there's been some questions about the interpretation of the new legislation, and I'm here today to tell you that on December the 12th, Bill 139 received royal assent, and what that did is it significantly changed the land use planning and appeal system by establishing the local planning appeal tribunal as the province-wide appeal body for land use planning appeals, thereby abolishing the OMB. What it did is it also established a local planning appeal support center. That's to provide information and support to citizens. And what it really does, the important thing really is it's going to support clearer, more timely decision making by councils, but it's going to give far more weight to local decisions. To the people who elected democratically by the people of this community will now have a much greater weight when it comes to anything that goes before the new tribunals under the local planning and appeal tribunal system. So basically it gives you as municipally elected officials far greater control over local planning, and we're hoping that as a result of that, much fewer decisions will need to be appealed in the first place. The importance of December 12th is twofold. The bill received royal assent, so it became law on that day. We had a transition period that ran till the 3rd of April, and hence my appearance before you now. The transition period has ended. The rules that were put into place basically say that any municipally initiated matters, like official plan amendments, for example, that were adopted after December the 12th of last year and appealed before April 3rd of this year, are subject to the new rules. Now, I know you've got a number of high-profile cases. I know you've got probably some cases that many of us, except for the proponents and yourself, may not have even heard of. But what I'm really here to today is to tell you that the transition rules would take into account anything that you have done as a municipal body since December the 12th of last year. So I won't get into some of the higher profile applications that you have before you, other than to tell you that I think this is tremendous news for our community. I think regardless of your political stripe or regardless of your political philosophy, this is something that local councils have asked for a long time, and that is a much greater say in the future of our community. I pulled out a pamphlet the other day that I used when I first ran for council in my 20s, and that would have been, I think, in the early 80s. And my son looked like he was about 2, and he's 38 today, so that tells you how long ago. And one of the promises I made to the people of Oakville that is I would find a way to abolish the OMB. So it feels very, very good to be able to stand here. It's been a lifetime's work. I didn't know how we were going to get there, other than to tell you we are there, and I wish you well with the new powers that you have at the local level. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Minister. I wonder, we have a number of questions for you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for coming, Kevin. It's always great to see you here. Brings back a lot of memories, doesn't it? And I want to talk about the time that you represented the council of the town of Oakville. You represented the mayor of the day when you were on the council of the town of Oakville, and you attended hearings and debates and messages and whatever you want to call them in Pickering or Ajax, one or the other, and studying then the OMB. And you came back to us and said, it's a terrible organization, we've got to change it. Now, is it a fact that now possibly that experience you had then led to this success today?
Absolutely, and I don't think I'm the only person. And I mean, there are people that sit on the OMB that are wonderful planners, excellent lawyers, great citizens, have a wealth of knowledge when it comes to planning issues around the town. The fact is that I think perception is reality, and citizens, I think, across Ontario felt their planning system in their own community somehow was stacked against them. That every 3 years, or now every 4 years, when they elected somebody to speak in their stead, and that person expressed an opinion, and a vote was held, and the majority view was upheld, that somehow some people who were unelected, no matter how skilled they were, could override that. And there was something that was just simply undemocratic about that. And I think Oakville and Ontario citizens expect more. The fact that the work I was doing in 2002 and 2003 in Pickering just really more clearly outlined the problems that the OMB had. And that led to the reforms along the way. But there were some people that had, I think, a very firm resolve that the OMB needed to stay. That despite the fact that Ontario was one of the only provinces, if not the only province, that had an appeal body that was like the OMB, for some reason Ontario couldn't survive with any other system. We've determined that that obviously isn't the case, and I think the local planning and appeal tribunals that will be set up now that will give much greater deference to the work that you do around these tables are going to result in a much better community, and a community that's planned much more in line with the thinking of the people in that community.
Thank you for your perseverance.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, Worship.
Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Kevin, very much for not only coming tonight, but for all your work behind the scenes. As you say, this is something that I don't think a lot of us even thought was ever possible, so I commend you for that. I do think it's one of those things that, as you pointed out, so many of the residents have struggled for so long with the fact that somebody who doesn't live in our community or reside in our community is often the one who's going to make a decision that's going to impact us for years to come. So thank you very, very much for all your hard work.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your kind
Thank
words.
you, Councillor Dudek. Anyone else? Council, on your behalf and on behalf of the town, I have a couple of things to say to Kevin. It's been a very long process since 2003 when Kevin led the charge to reform the OMB. He recruited me to testify to the OMB Reform Task Force. I said my residents association had come to the conclusion that the OMB could not be saved by reform. It needed to be killed and replaced. We were told that would be impossible. Well, it took a long time, but Kevin, once again, you've delivered for Oakville and this time for Ontario. And it reminds me of what the combat engineers used to say in World War II. The difficult, we do right away. The impossible takes a little longer. Council believes the public should have the benefit of the latest and best land use policies, and that's why we unanimously asked the province to get Bill 139 into effect at the earliest possible time. The Bill 139 changes give, as Kevin just said, greater deference to the town's decisions on a wide range of land use planning issues when they're appealed. Deference is the heart and soul of this change. Deference to the local decision makers, deference to democracy. We will be better able to ensure growth takes place in a planned and orderly manner. We will be better able to maintain the character of the town. We will be better able to conserve cultural heritage and natural heritage. And as Council is aware, the Glen Abbey lands are subject to a number of ongoing legal proceedings before the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal and the courts. We can expect a legal update in the coming weeks from the town solicitor on Glen Abbey for Council and the public. For now, I'll simply summarize it this way. The changes to the Planning Act introduced through Bill 139 will apply to the town-initiated official plan and zoning amendments for Glen Abbey. That's because these decisions were made after the new rules came into effect. Council's decisions on Club Link's development applications were made before the new rules came into effect. Those decisions were appealed to the Ontario Municipal Board, which has now been replaced by the Local Planning Appeal Tribunal. The Local Planning Appeal Tribunal will use the old rules on those appeals. For now, everyone owes Kevin a great debt of gratitude for his constant fortitude in our town's interests. Kevin has brought to life real OMB reform that empowers local municipal councils, not just yours, not just ours. This town has invested in Kevin as its Queen's Park representative for 15 years, and ladies and gentlemen, has that investment ever paid off? Kevin, I knew if anyone could do it, that person is you, and I thank you on behalf of the entire town.
Thank you.
Council, I now need a motion to receive the report. Councillor Dudek, all those in favor? And that is carried. Thank you, everyone. Now, the first public hearing item for us tonight is the public meeting report on zoning bylaw amendment and draft plan of subdivision by the Halton Catholic District School Board for 2123 Hickson Street. And Council, of course, has already studied this file, but we have our senior planner, Rob Thun, here to reprise it or summarize it for the public and those watching at home so that you'll understand what we're talking about. Rob, we're all ears, and we look forward to your report.
Thank you, Mayor Burton and members of Council. The Halton Catholic Separate School Board has submitted a zoning bylaw amendment and a draft plan of subdivision application to rezone 2123 Hickson Street, the former St. Anne's school site, and for the creation of a 14-lot plan of subdivision, residential, on a proposed 17-meter wide public street. Included in this application is a 0.314 hectare park, which the town will be acquiring. So the report can be found on page 13 of tonight's agenda. And the purpose of tonight is to obtain any further public or council input related into this application. And for council's information, and as a follow-up to Mr. Flynn and the public, we will be returning on June 11th, prior to the expiration of the 150 days required under Bill 139. The air photo that's before council and the public provides you some context for the surrounding area. The subject lands are located on the north side of Hickson Street, directly across from Solon Gate Drive. The property has remained vacant for several years with the demolition of the former school, St. Anne's, and the property has been deemed surplus by the school board. The town has also, as background, entered into a purchase agreement with the school board to purchase approximately 0.7 acres, which is the 3.14 hectares of land for park purposes. This is shown as the park on the following draft plan of subdivision. And as you can see from the air photo, the surrounding properties are detached dwellings on public streets. From the official plan perspective, the site is within a stable residential area as defined by the Livable Oakville plan and is designated low-density residential. Detached dwellings are permitted with a maximum residential density of 29 units per site hectare. Consideration will be given to the intensification policies, sections 11.18 and 11.19 of the official plan. From a zoning perspective, on the screen is the existing and the proposed. So from an existing perspective, the site reflecting the former school use is community use within bylaw 2014-014. The surrounding area to the school site, as you will see, is zoned RL3-O, the O suffix. The applicant is seeking to amend the zoning bylaw to RL3-O, the same as what is surrounding the site, and they are not asking for any relief in the zoning regulations. So the stock zoning requirements are what the applicant has applied for. So, as you see here, this is the draft plan of subdivision and some numbers related to frontages and lot areas. There are 14 lots being proposed on a public street, as mentioned. The public street is 17 meters wide. The 0.31 hectare park on the frontage of Hickson and on Street A is the subject matter being discussed for park purposes in the acquisition. The lot frontages and the lot areas, as you can see from the table, all meet the RL3-O zoning regulations. The alignment of Street A is directly across from Solon Gate Drive. Public information meeting was held on March 6th. There were 14 members of the public in attendance. The comments raised at the public information meeting are captured within a consideration section within the staff report. There has been one public submission, and that is captured in Appendix A. Regional comments and draft conditions are contained in Appendix B. Matters that are going to be considered as part of the future recommendation report coming before council include the feedback from the public and council, both from the public information meeting, anything that has been received, and anything that is generated by tonight's meeting. The technical reviews associated with a draft plan of subdivision will also be reviewed, together with the provincial policy statement, the growth plan, the region's official plan. Also, we will be looking at details related to the zoning and the draft plan and in relation to urban design. So we're going to give this a fulsome review. So, Your Worship, in conclusion, to members of council, staff are putting forward the recommendation for council's consideration. Once again, tonight's meeting relates to obtaining further public or council comments related to the future reporting. The application does remain in technical review. And as I mentioned, staff will be returning on June 11th to the P&D meeting with a recommendation report within the 150-day time frame as set out in Bill 139. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Thun. Council, before I poll the audience, we have no registered delegations. Do any members of council have questions? Councilor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Rob. I appreciate this. And I would like to thank the Catholic School Board as well. I know when the lot sat open for a very long time, I had a number of residents concerned about how many townhouses are going to try to jam in here now, and that's always the nature of the fear from the residents. A couple questions, first of all. So are the setbacks in this area, the rear yard setbacks, the same as the rear yard setbacks to the surrounding homes?
The rear yard setback in this area, zoning-wise, is 7.5 meters. If they have built to that standard, I don't know. That review can be undertaken as part of the recommendation meeting. However, if a property was to be redeveloped, they have to comply with the 7.5 meter rear yard setback, similar to what's being proposed here.
Okay, so sorry, I guess I wasn't trying to pigeonhole you to know what every single property around that area's backyard setback was, but the zoning in the area is the same zoning that we're having here in terms of what the setbacks are allowed.
That is correct, and they're not asking for any relief from those zoning regulations.
Perfect, thank you. Well, one question sort of desire I'd raise. Maybe if you can just point out or elaborate on the tree canopy and what we're going to try and do to preserve some of those old trees, and however possible, I know some of them need to go, some of them are ash trees, some of them are coming down, but what we might be able to do to look at those old, mature 80-foot trees that are around the property, if you might be able to just elaborate on what is currently the plan and what we might be able to look at further.
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor O'Meara. On the screen right now is the tree preservation plan as submitted with the application. I've attempted to color the areas that are being proposed at the present time for protection. As you will see, they're on the periphery of the school site. There are several trees internal to the site that have the potential to be preserved. We have communicated with the applicant already with the applicant to determine if we can save any more, or there's a potential for transplanting some trees. With the programming of the Parkland 2, if there's a potential to save any trees by transplanting, that option could be looked at also.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. A comment and a question, sir. I would just like to, piggyback on what Kevin said about the Catholic School Board. When this began, before any negotiations even began, the board very conscientiously said to different people, including our staff, we're going to be applying for something here, but we're going to keep it the same as it is now for the rest of the community. And that's exactly what they've done, and they weren't greedy. And thank you for your comments as well on that. And the second point, which is a question, is up and down Sable, there's a line of communication wires, I think belonging to both Cogeco and Bell.
Yes.
I don't believe, as far as I can find out, that any of them are used, and yet they're still there. What plans would be available, or how do we control getting these things removed sooner than later?
Okay.
Because they're not effective.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Robinson, I was made aware of that issue or that concern at the public information meeting. The utility corridor is along the east property boundary in this area right here, as shown, but it also extends almost to Rebecca Street. So the question that has to be answered and reviewed with the utility companies is, can that portion be taken down? My understanding from some of the residents, as recent as a half an hour ago, is Sable and Sunray all have their Bell Cogeco lines coming off of the street. They're buried now. So we can investigate the aspect of, can those poles come down? And I will defer to the applicant to review that situation prior to coming back for the recommendation report.
So we'll hear more and probably the answer to that a little later on.
When we return in June,
June.
I expect to have an answer for you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you, Your Worship.
Anyone else? Are there any members of the public here with information for council on this matter that you'd like added to the file as staff develop their recommendation report for June 11th? Madam Clerk, I see none. Ward 1, which of you would like to move receipt? Councillor O'Meara.
Mark Simeone to see if he has additional comments to add to the recommendation.
Mr. Simeone, do you have any additional comments to add to the recommendation?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just noted that we will be undertaking a review of the utility corridor along the east boundary, and will be a feature of the staff report returning on June 11th. And that's all I've noted from our discussions this evening.
All righty. Councillor O'Meara.
And just to make sure that if there are trees that are able to be preserved as we move forward, that we do everything we can to preserve those trees.
Thank you. I will add that, Your Worship.
Thank you.
All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. All right, item 2. Item 2, I believe, has drawn some public interest. And if we give our attention to Charlie McConnell, he will provide everyone with a summary of the application. And this too, well, I tell you what, I'll wait a second while people quietly leave. So, this item is, as Mr. McConnell is about to say, and I'll just say it to underline it, this item is also an information report where we're here to receive public comment, and we won't be making a decision tonight. It will be on another night, which I'm not aware of, but Mr. McConnell will likely advise us. So with that, Mr. McConnell, council, and the public are looking forward to your report.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Burton and members of council. So this is a statutory public meeting related to an official plan amendment, a zoning bylaw amendment, and a draft plan of subdivision application proposing a mixed-use development. The report can be found on page 41 of tonight's agenda. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to obtain input from the public and council related to this application, and no recommendation on the application is being proposed at this time. The application was deemed complete on the date of submission, which was January 16th, 2018, which was after Bill 139 received royal assent. In order to provide council the opportunity to make a decision within the 210-day timeframe for official plan amendments as identified by Bill 139, staff will be presenting a recommendation report back to this committee on August 7th, 2018. So just by way of context, the subject lands are located on the north side of Dundas Street West, east of Gladeside Avenue, and west of George Savage Avenue. The site has an area of approximately 2.2 hectares with 69 meters of frontage along Dundas Street West. The site is currently vacant. The North Oakville East Secondary Plan designates the subject property as Dundas Urban Core, Natural Heritage System, and Residential Area on figure NOE 2 on the land use plan in that North Oakville plan. In addition, the lands front onto Dundas Street, which is identified as a major arterial/transit corridor. The official plan amendment is proposed in order to increase the maximum permitted height on the Dundas Urban Core designated lands from 8 stories to 10 stories in height. The North Oakville East Master Plan illustrates the conceptual design and land use categories for the North Oakville East planning area. Development applications are reviewed in the context of the master plan in order to evaluate consistency. Within the North Oakville Master Plan, the neighborhood area designation of the secondary plan are further categorized as general urban and Dundas Urban Core as shown on this slide. The subject property is zoned existing development, ED, by zoning bylaw number 2009-189, which allows only uses that legally existed on the date of the passing of the bylaw coming into effect. In order to allow for the proposed development, a zoning bylaw amendment proposes to rezone the lands to Dundas Urban Core, a special provision zone, a general urban and natural heritage system zones. So with respect to the application itself, the official plan amendment, the zoning bylaw amendment, and the draft plan of subdivision proposes a mixed-use development that includes a 10-story mixed-use building comprising of 228 apartment units and 390 square meters of ground floor commercial space. It also is proposing 36 3-story stacked back-to-back townhouse units and 17 3-story townhouse dwelling units. Again, the purpose of the official plan amendment is to increase the maximum building height in the Dundas urban core from what is presently permitted at 8 stories to 10 stories in height. The purpose of the zoning amendment is to rezone the lands from the existing development zone to Dundas urban core, special provision, general urban, and natural heritage system. The draft plan of subdivision is required in order to provide for the dedication of the portion of Shannon's Creek to the natural heritage system and to allow for a new north-south road, being Trailside Drive, which will connect Dundas Street West to 16 Mile Drive. So these are a series of renderings, Your Worship, that illustrate the proposed development in somewhat of a 3D fashion. This illustrates the 10-story proposed building from the perspective of the intersection of Dundas Street West and Trailside Drive. The red line indicates below the red line is the 8-story element, and then the area above that represents the 2 additional floors that are being proposed through the official plan amendment. This is just an alternate view of the same building, looking at it more from Trailside Drive. Again, the red line illustrates the area above, which is the extra 2 stories that are being sought. This rendering shows the view of the proposed stacked townhouses on the west side of Trailside Drive from across the street. And this shows a view of the proposed townhouses on the east side of Trailside Drive, also from across the street. So with respect to public comments, a public information meeting was held on March 1st of this year, which was attended by 6 residents. Comments raised by residents included a concern for the negative impacts of increasing the building height from 8 to 10 stories in terms of sun shadowing and obstruction of views from their existing homes. Concern that existing land use permissions in the Dundas Urban Core designation allow for an 8-story building height. Residents expected that future development along Dundas Street would maintain lower building heights that exist within the surrounding area and that taller buildings would appear out of place. They also expressed a concern for the impact of increased traffic congestion from the proposed development during rush hour on Trailside Drive, Gladside Avenue, and George Savage Avenue. There was a concern for the traffic safety and potential for speeding along the extension of Trailside Drive between 16 Mile Drive and Dundas Street, and a concern for the availability of school accommodation within the neighborhood. So as we move forward, a complete analysis of the application is presently underway and includes a review of the following matters which have been identified to date. Clearly the impact that we have received from the public and that we'll receive from council this evening. Comments that have been raised by staff, departments, and agencies as a result of the technical review, which is currently underway, and consistency with the provincial policy statement and conformity with the growth plan and regional official plan, and all of the applicable policy of the North Oakville East Secondary Plan, including consistency with the goals and objectives of the master plan, and with the policies of the Dundas Urban Core and general urban area designations with respect to use and density, the impact and interface of the proposed built form with the existing and planned neighborhood context, consistency with the vision and principles of the North Oakville Urban Design and Open Space Guidelines and objectives of the town and regional transportation plans, and from a zoning perspective, an evaluation of the suitability of the proposed zone and regulation amendments in relation to the proposed development and policies of the North Oakville East Secondary Plan and the existing neighborhood. And from a subdivision perspective, a review of the proposed width and alignment of the proposed north-south extension of Trailside Drive. So, Your Worship, in conclusion, staff put forth the following recommendation as shown for Council's consideration. The application does remain under active review, and in order to provide Council the opportunity to make a decision within the 210 days for the official plan amendment, again, we'll bring back a final recommendation report on August 7th, 2018. The purpose, again, of tonight's meeting is to obtain further public input. In addition, given that the file falls under the Reformed Land Use Planning System put in place by Bill 139, we encourage members of council to provide input on this application this evening. And this feedback will be responded to in the staff recommendation report and will form part of the public record.
Thank you very
else,
much.
Your Worship, and look forward to any input.
Council, before I turn to Ward 5 and then Ward 4 for questions on this, we have 4 registered delegations on this file, and I'll poll the audience as well. Would Council like to go first?
I just have a quick question.
Councillor Knoll, you're first.
Thank you,
Councillor Grant, then Councillor Elgar.
So based on my calculations, it's 281 combined residential units being proposed for the site, correct?
Sorry, I didn't.
Based on my calculations, the 228 apartment units, 36 three-story stacked back-to-back townhouses, and 17 three-story townhouse units, total of 281 units for the whole site, correct?
That's correct.
Based on the North Oakville secondary plan, what would the as of right yield be for that particular property?
Through your worship, they're within this falls within the density allowances of the North Oakville secondary plan. The only purpose of the amendment being sought is for the additional 2 stories. On that high density Dundas urban core designation, it's measured by floor space index. So it's the amount of massing of the building in relation to the land area, and that comes in at 2.4, or it allows a maximum of 2.5 FSI or floor space index, and this proposal does not exceed that.
Okay, so the predominant issue here is the height of the building, and that's one of the things on the issues list that was identified through the residents is the height, and specifically sun and shadow. I didn't see that a sun and shadow study as part of the list of technical review items in the report. Is that something you'll be pursuing?
Yes, that is something that we are presently looking at,
Okay.
and we'll certainly make note of it after tonight's meeting as well.
Okay. Also, you know that particularly those of us in North Oakville, but I think across the town, but those of us in North Oakville have been very concerned about parking issues within these newer developments and the availability, particularly of visitor parking spaces. Are you going to be looking at that very carefully as well, so we're able to maximize our availability of parking spaces on that particular property?
Through you, your worship, a traffic impact study was required and has been submitted with the application, and that is under active review as well. And we certainly do look at the adequacy of the supply of parking against the town standard and for the particular area. Okay. So yes, we will be looking at that as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Councillor Grant?
Thank you. Seeing how my question about parking was stolen, just to dovetail on that though, when you say appropriate for this particular area, we've been discovering lately that what's appropriate for this particular area is not appropriate at all. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, can we give an extra eye to making sure that we're not stuck with a 0.25 or something silly, that we make sure there's adequate spaces for visitors?
Mm-hmm. So we'll certainly take that back to our traffic engineers that will assess the supply that is being provided in the context of this area to look at the existing baseline. And I think what they would always normally do is look to what the current traffic situation is and the capacity within the existing road system. So we'll certainly look at that as well.
Okay, thank you. And I realize that the residential character study applied only to south of Dundas. Mm-hmm. But looking at the townhomes that you had a picture of, they seem a little different from what I would call to be now an established community. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering how that fits in any way with the way that community looks or feels. Mm-hmm. I realize that we're not here to make judgment calls, and I'm usually the first person to say, different style buildings make for more interesting urban landscape, but certainly these stand out quite a bit from what's around them right now. Mm-hmm. And it's just a small niggly thing on the back of my neck.
All right. Thank you
for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Elgar?
Thank you very much. There's a concern I have, and it was raised start by Councillor Knoll. It has to do with parking, whether it be tenant parking or visitor parking. But whatever we are doing or whatever our baseline is right now, it doesn't seem to be working. for the residents once they move into the condominiums. The complaints are coming in fast and furious. There's just nowhere to park. Are we going to be looking at changing our baseline requirements for parking? If we can't do it for this application, something's gone wrong. And I think it might be a good idea if councillors send in the issues that addresses, and maybe town staff could meet with the condominium people to find out what's not working in the town. Because it's turning out to be a big issue right now. And I don't know whether everybody else feels that way, but I've certainly got getting ill with it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. This actually question has come, I think each time we brought forward a North Oakville application. And we are looking at parking, I can assure you that. We're looking at it from all aspects of it. Keeping in mind that North Oakville was planned as a transit first type of community, and so we need to look at the transit availability. What are the opportunities within that context? Is this an interim solution until we build to the full functionality of the transportation system? Those are all of the issues that we will be looking at. But parking certainly is one. We've even looked at some ideas of perhaps there's some interim parking provided that would still allow it to transition into the development as the transportation system builds out to its full extent. So it is an issue we're looking at, and we will be reporting on it specifically on this application, but also in the larger context.
It won't just be North Oakville, correct? It'll be south of Dundas also? Like the parking for south of Dundas where there are condos?
Well, North Oakville's been identified as a specific issue, so we were looking at that in terms of the requirements, but we can certainly look at the standards for South Oakville as well, although I don't think we were aware there were as many issues in South Oakville, given the new zoning bylaw, so we'll follow up on that piece as well.
Yeah, no, I mean just south of Dundas. That's
yes.
what I'm referring to. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Commissioner, I'd just like to reinforce what you said by reminding you that council has a view, which council has expressed many times, that the transit supportive densities envisioned for North Oakville have not yet occurred. And, you know, we're getting the low density. It's the classic. In fact, this was foretold by well-experienced members of council that we would get low density and the high density would not show up, and we wouldn't be able to run an economical transit system, and it all, you know, this was foretold, I guess. What's the line from the movie? It is unfolding as it has been. Anyway, Councilor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question pertains to the commercial element of this development. And pardon me, 390 square meters is about roughly 4,000 square feet of commercial. Do we know where, is the commercial just fronting on Dundas, or is it going to go up the side of the trail side road? And also, do we know roughly how many units they're going to make, or are there going to be like 10 at 400 square meters? Or do we know what the more conceptual elements are of what they're envisioning for commercial at this development?
Through you, Your Worship, presently what is being proposed by the proponents, and if they're in attendance they can speak with more precise detail, but presently and you can see on the elevation in front of you, the intent is to provide the majority or the vast majority along the trail side, so off of Dundas, possibly at the corner as well, and maybe some of it wrapping around the Dundas Street frontage. But it's primarily along the side of the building where there may be an opportunity for on-street parking and where it may be more of a pedestrian-friendly type of shopping experience. So that's one of the details that we're presently discussing with the proponent. As far as the breakdown, I haven't seen the internal configuration. This is a concept at this point in time. They might be able to speak to that, the square footage of each individual unit.
Yeah, and I just mentioned this because we see it time and time again is, you know, you got a bunch of small ones, which make it almost impossible to have flexibility of retail options, and it forces the same type of retail time and time again all across the north side of Dundas. And it's tough if you don't have a 1,200 square foot or a 1,500 square foot place mixed in with smaller places. So I'm just interested in the diversity of commercial areas that you need in order to have a variety of different uses in order to serve the people of the community that you're building the development for. So I would ask if we have those conversations that we can try and maybe change the paradigm around how we want to envision commercial space when it's not just, here's one, here's another, and move on. So thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Councillor Grant?
Thank you. And actually, Mr. Chair, you express this better than I can. I'm the one that usually comes up with the nonsensical analogies. But I just want to reinforce the point that when we're talking about transit-first design, we've seen and we remember, at least in the north area, that we're not catching up to any of the modal splits that we had ever imagined we could. And it's going to be a long time before we can. So I just would like to encourage the staff that sooner rather than later, for whatever is coming forward, that we have to keep thinking about the fact that what we planned for didn't work. I mean, the best laid plans, as they say, always go awry. So I would just like to further encourage your strong words from before.
Councillor Knoll? Thank you, Councillor.
In case this has been picked up before, I'd like to talk about parking for a couple, no. I do want to talk about parking, though that was a joke. I'm just looking at this now, I'm looking at the commercial space, and I'm particularly noting the fact that the commercial, I assume that the picture on the screen now reflects the frontage of the retail spaces, I presume. And what I do note is that there's no parking there for the retail spaces, and we know the challenge between amongst having successful retail space and having available parking. So when we're looking at the whole overall parking issue, I think we should also be looking very carefully at our experience when it comes to North Oakville development of retail space and the availability of parking and the success and the connection of the three. So I would, if you can put that on the issues list too, I'd be very interested in seeing what that looks like coming back. Because again, based on what I'm seeing, again, if that is the retail space, and I presume that it is,
Yes, it is.
it's going to evolve into what's happened up to this point, and it's going to be a lot of nail salons, chiropractors, and chartered accountants. Not that there's anything wrong with those three professions, but it would be nice to have some variety, as Councillor O'Meara pointed out.
Well, let's all remember that we don't get to run the market, and the market has a way of deciding what it wants. Councillor Adams, what would you like to add to the list?
I just wanted to reiterate Councillor Knoll's comments about shadowing, and in particular the issue of shadowing across to the south, and whether there's any issues associated with, I'll call it, wind tunnel effect in this particular location with any of the potential adjacent buildings that might go in. I know that along Dundas we've got a number of locations where we have allowances for high-density buildings, and there could be cases where you have 8-story buildings adjacent to each other, and I've seen other locations where it is a problem, particularly in the north-south orientation.
Alrighty then. Thank you, Councillor. Madam Clerk, would you begin calling the delegations?
Our first listed delegation is Keen Accra, and I'm sure I didn't pronounce that correctly.
Oh, Mr. Croy, we need you to come down to the center podium and speak into the microphone, and you can bring company. And if you don't, we won't be able to hear you, so it'll all be for naught.
Thank you so much.
So if you speak in the general direction of the microphone, you don't have to get too close.
Yep.
Everything will be great.
Good evening. My name is Kiana Krawi. Thank you for letting me and my neighbor Omar speak here today. Regarding the application for the 407 Dundas Street West apartment building, I wanted to express my strong objection to this project, to this application. I'm going to explain to you why. I live with my family on Trailside Drive. Trailside Drive today is 2 parts, north of 16 Mile and south of 16 Mile. I'm on the south part of 16 Mile, so we are only 4 houses there. And the development is just beside us, the new proposed. So to be more specific about the topic I want to talk about today and why these two buildings or one building is going to be a burden for this neighborhood, I want to talk about the safety. These two buildings will create for us, will affect the safety, sorry, for the neighborhood, and these two buildings will create for us damaging, in my opinion, the face of our neighborhood right now. The intersection of Trailside Drive and 16 Mile is my main concern. I pass this intersection on a daily basis, 7 days a week. This intersection has blind spots from right and left. The school is how many meters away from this intersection?
It's 42. Oh, 190, sorry.
So it's less than 200 meters away from this intersection. And the blind spot, so the nearest distance that I can see the coming car, the westbound traffic coming from 16 Mile from my position on Trailside, on the stop sign, is
it's 42.
42 meters.
To be exact.
And it's an uphill. 16 Mile, 16 Mile Drive curves down, heading towards Trailside Drive. So what I do and what my neighbors do every day, we go slower inside the intersection to make sure that the cars, it's safe to pass the intersection from right and left. Right side, as I said, blind spot from the school, curves down. Left side, which is the westbound traffic, 16 Mile allowing cars to park on the road. So parking cars all the time on the road. So both sides, we need to proceed on the intersection like 4, 5, 6, 7 meters to see that it's safe and then cross. That's on daily basis. Adding to that, we have school kids passing and crossing this intersection, hundreds of school kids passing this intersection. So daily basis, honkings, brake clashes, we hear it from our home. Our home is about 30, 35 meters from this intersection. So we are not on the corner. Imagine adding 200, 300, I don't know what's the other building proposed, the second one, 400 more units to this area. Most of the traffic will head Trailside Drive on this intersection I'm mentioning, because Trailside Drive and Dundas, the proposal that they have, there's no traffic light. So they're going to merge into Dundas. They're going to go to the traffic light on Dundas and Neagawa if they want to head east. Otherwise, they will take Trailside Drive north, take the intersection right and left, and take the next traffic light. So I imagine at least 80% of the traffic from the proposal, from the application, from these two buildings and the townhouses will use this mentioned crowded, congested intersection. And we are only 4 houses now on this intersection using it on a daily basis. Okay, there are 10 houses on the lane beside us, but half of them, they take Lakeside Drive and take the other way. So what I did, I spoke to the neighborhood. I listened to them, and unanimously they said we want to sign a petition for objecting this project. And Mr. Mayor, I have handed over this petition with 96 names to the Planning and Development Council.
There's 14 being added.
I didn't know that he's mentioning that there's more
14
names added.
14 families being added to the list. So we reached 110.
So this is the matter of the safety I wanted to highlight. Please consider it. Please think about it. It's a concern for us. I take my kid every day hand to cross him the intersection because I'm very afraid from this one. It's not safe right now. Adding more, it will make it more dangerous. So now you have the facts that I've provided you with the safety and the petition with 96 names. It's your call. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for bringing your information. And I know you'll be interested in looking at the traffic study, which tries to justify how this will all work. And I know staff will be examining it more carefully as a result of your submissions tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, would you?
I think I want to add,
Oh.
Worship, thanks for giving us the opportunity to be here. And I just want to shed some lights on the playground and the green area on this. I'm living on the north side of 60 Mile on the trail side. And so I'm just in the front of the park on the trail side. So my kids play there. I have 3 kids, so that park is already.
If you two would trade places,
okay.
The microphone would favor you.
Yeah. So again, the playgrounds my kids are playing right now, it's already crowded. So I don't know what's the plan for the 381 units. People you're going to put in on these units, where they're going to play, where they're going to study, because I don't want to repeat what it's already been said about the school and accommodations, but my son is in grade 6, and the school right now they extended to grade 8. I have twins in JK, and it's already 7 classes JK. 7 classes, each class 27. So imagine, it's very crowded already. And the parking, again, these guys will be crossing in commercial plus residential. That's going to be an issue because they will be extended to the trail side. Trail side is already one way, and some places you cannot park. It's only parking on one side of that trail side. So traffic, many people, I would imagine, they will take trail side goes to North Park to get to the 407. So I just live across the park, so I don't feel safe to let my kids cross the road as of today. Just watching them, it's going to be very, very dangerous area for us. And this is not, I'm talking about myself, I'm talking about on behalf of 110 people, they have objection about this. So they already seen it from different perspective, and they express their rejection and objection to this. Thanks, Worship.
Thank you both for your information.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, would you? Oh, sorry, Councillor Lischina.
Thank you for your presentation today. So my question is, well, as Mr. McConnell indicated, that currently we're talking about the 2 extra stories. So the rest of the development there actually is already permitted. So are you saying that you don't want the building there at all? Because it doesn't seem like that would be possible. Are you talking about the 2 stories? Is that what you're against?
Yes, go ahead. Sure.
Okay, so I'm more like
Maybe you'd like to change places again?
To have a solution for trailside Dundas. Trailside Dundas, as I mentioned in the presentation, there is no traffic light right now, and in the plan there is no traffic light. So either Trailside Drive North, as I mentioned, or Dundas and turning around from the traffic light, which is already busy, very busy intersection, that one. So either have a solution there with the traffic light. I don't know, they mentioned something with the law, again, with the distance between traffic light and traffic light to make it more fluent, the traffic. But this one will have a good impact on our point.
Thank you. So, Mr. McConnell, the information or questions about the traffic, that's part of the traffic study as well, the lights? Is that correct?
Yes, through your worship, the traffic study would look at all of the implications of the development on the surrounding road network and what additional enhancements would be necessary to that in order to support the added development.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
Next delegation is Joanne Cornell.
Welcome. Council looks forward to your information.
Good evening, Your Worship, councillors. I live at 3045 Gladeside Avenue. My name is Joanne Cornell. I've been a resident of Oakville for 4.5 years. I previously lived in St. Catharines, so I look upon moving to Oakville as quite the step up. I understand that the application has been approved for an 8-story building. So the conversation tonight is about an additional 2 stories, bringing it to 10. I have heard of the concerns regarding shadowing, the look of the property, and just the feel of the neighborhood. My concern here tonight is about traffic increase, and what it brings. It brings congestion, and it brings frustration with people speeding, and of course, we're going to have problems with accidents. And I live in a very residential neighborhood where there are children everywhere. So that being said, I look at the traffic situation. I understand, if my understanding is correct, that there's going to be an extension south of Trailside Drive down to Dundas Street West. So the calculation is, thank you, the calculation is that there are going to be 281 units. So allowing 1 car per unit, that's 281 cars. For people to exit this new, I call it a compound, they have one of 2 options to access out. It's to go on to Dundas Street West, where there's only one option, it's to turn right, going west. Or if you want to go towards east, you need to exit through Nayagawa Boulevard. My concern is this, is I live right on the pond and I have access to my property through lane 132. As it is now, the lane is very narrow, and frankly, 2 cars cannot. I mean, when I come down to my property and I see a car coming, I'll sort of sidestep onto somebody's driveway because I do not trust the oncoming car to see me, acknowledge me, and respect my space. So what I see happening with these occupants at these new residents at this property is that if they are wanting to go east, they need to make their way to Niagara Boulevard. The option is to go to Trailside Drive and make a left. I suspect that they'll see lane 132 and think, oh, here's a shortcut, especially if they want to go to Dundas Street Square, Dundas Market Square, the plaza there. Lane 132, I can just see it becoming even more of a situation because what's going to happen is that they'll take a shortcut instead of taking Trailside Drive where there are no street lights. And I have at times gone down that road to exit. And it's a situation to make a left-hand turn because of the traffic. So the traffic's a concern. It's a bottleneck. And I'd like to know what the town of Oakville, how is it going to address the situation of lane 132 as being an escape from having to deal with Trailside Drive?
Well, thank you very much for bringing those concerns, and we'll all look forward to the August report and see what the planners are going to recommend.
All right, thank you very much.
Madam Clerk, the next delegation.
The last listed delegation is Ian Scott.
Mr. Scott? No delegation. Anyone else? Okay. Are there any other members of the public with information or concerns for council to relay to staff? Ma'am, your standing seems a long time. Why don't you come next? Welcome. Please identify yourself for the clerk, and council looks forward to your information.
Thank you. My name is Anna Maria Yarulo. I live on Gladeside. I'm a neighbor of Joanne and Keane, and my concern is certainly everything that everyone has said this evening, but also the height of this building is just crazy to go 10 stories. First of all, I appreciate that a lot of the other developers along Dundas have maintained a lower height on their buildings. You know, I think it's great. I have something here from Mattamy. I'm not sure if you can see it on the screen. I'm not sure what needs to be done. But, you know, this is kind of the height that we're looking at along Dundas Street. And I think that it's a good height. I think that it meets a lot of the demands of getting a little bit more availability for housing in our area. And I think that it works well with the streetscape. When I saw the drawing for that 10-story building, honestly, I thought it looked like a spaceship. It is very, very large. It's very imposing, and I'm not sure why this developer can't maintain at least the height that all the other developers have been doing to this point. My concern is that if they are allowed to go up to 10 stories, that adjoining property where the restaurant is right now, my understanding is that they are proposing another one of these 10-story buildings on that side, and I would hate to set a precedence that they can go up to 10 stories. So I face the pond, and it's lovely, and I know that there will be growth, and I can certainly appreciate that, but I would like to keep it at 8 stories, if not even lower. I'm not sure why this developer needs to go that high. The other thing is that in terms of the way that building is going to look from my point of view, and also the people south of Dundas, so we have just basic residential housing, 2 stories. When they look across the street, they're going to see this towering building right over their heads. There will be shadowing, of course. There's also going to be at nighttime lots and lots of lights because people will be living in there. And so I imagine that there's going to be this glow coming from this building. It's mostly glass construction. I don't think that it suits the neighborhood at all. And I have a question about the retail on the lower floor. Does it need to be there? So does the 8-story relate to what the overall height of the building is, what they're allowed in terms of maximum, or the number of stories? So if they eliminate that lower level of retail, is it possible that even though it's 8 stories, it would be less than what that red line is showing on that drawing right now? So those are my concerns. I would just like that architecture to look like it blends in better with the community. I've been in Oakville for 24 years, and I love it here. I love the green space. I love it. And so seeing this thing to me is not going to be a pleasant sight. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your information and your concerns. Sir, I saw your hand. Yes, you're welcome to come, please. We look forward to your information. The clerk would appreciate knowing your name.
Thank you, Your Worship, and the council and the president that are here tonight. I thank them for coming. I'm T.K. Ding. After living in Mississauga for 20 over years, I moved, my family, my wife and myself moved here 7 years ago. We bought a house along Niagawa, and when we purchased the house, we were told by the builder that there will be visitor parking lot along the roadside, and they extended the road, so we had no parking space for visitors. Now, let me reiterate about what Ken had just spoken earlier about his concern. Now, I'm a retiree. I was ex-insurance broker before. We own a brokerage in Mississauga. Now, every day we are along Trailside and 16 Mile. Every day, morning, afternoon, evening, I hear screeching brake and bang, accident along that road. Right now, the development is good for the city. Don't get me wrong. Now, you need tax income, dollar, and all that. Now, I have no issue if the road is open to access to Dundas Street, not when all the 200 over vehicles are creeping up to 16 mile, turning left and right. As they mentioned earlier, this road is obscured by parking vehicle along the 16 mile. My issue is how can you extend 16 mile to be a major trunk road for these additional vehicles to ply along that stretch of road to access to Dundas, to either Niagawa or George Savage Road. Now, when I move here, my concern right now is, it seems to me like Oakville is a place for a senior home, a retiree, because there's no social interaction. My guests come to my house, they get parking ticket. Myself get 2 parking tickets, which I come here twice to pay. And you can have, as a retiree, I believe, you can have healthy food, good exercise to live long. But the most important is social interaction. If you don't have that, you go to depression, you go down the road pretty fast. So that's my concern. And also the other point about the safety as an insurance broker. Right now, God forbid, there's no kids being run down by the vehicle yet. When there is something that happened, it will be a big issue. And I remember very clearly, Your Lordship, Worship, several years ago, I had the opportunity to attend one of your town hall. You make a commitment that you want Oakville to be a township, not a city, if you can remember that.
The saying was actually said in 1977 by 6-term Mayor Harry Barrett, who is now in his 90s and still with us. And Harry taught everybody to say, Oakville, so in 77, we were about 70,000 people, 77,000 people. And that's when Harry said, Oakville is a city that calls itself a town and acts like a village. And that is his famous aphorism. I thank you for giving me the excuse to repeat it. I love it. And thank you very much for coming with your information.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Yes, sir?
Sorry, I just want to add.
Well, you still have to.
Take my turn.
You still need to come here.
Oh.
I'm recognizing you, but I'm asking you to work with us here. There's people watching. We believe that there are people at home watching.
I guess so. Sorry, Nancy, Natalia, sorry. To reply to your question, if it's 8 or 10, I would say make it 3, to be honest with you. And why? Because of all the reason everybody talk about. And I want to add one more thing to it is it's about the reflection of the sun during the day and night. It's night at the lights for the other neighborhoods and houses because the people will be on the backyards and during the summertime, and also the reflection of the sun. That's going to be a big factor for the people 2-story around the whole area over there. That's going to be an issue for them. Thank you. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Councilor Lischina.
Just a quick question for Mr. McConnell one more time. Each floor on the in the apartments, how many units is that?
Through you, Your Worship, I don't know the exact number of units per floor. I'm sorry I don't have that. I can certainly try to get that for you. And I think the developer is in the room. If he wanted to provide that information, he could. I'm sorry I don't have the precise number.
Actually, Councillor Knoll said the number of units in the apartment building, just divide it by 10. And that'll give you a close.
9 per floor?
So about 9.
No, divide by 9.
Divide by 9, sorry. We'll get it right yet. Does that help any? All right. Who would like to move receipt of all this information? Councillor Knoll.
Your worship, can I just want, because we have a number of people in the audience, I just want to clarify, and you probably would anyway, but clarify, we're not making a decision. We've heard lots of interesting and important comments that the staff will take back, and we've re-emphasized a number of those issues. But no decisions being made tonight, and this will be coming back later on for a decision. So just so that, to know that your ward councillors and all of council have heard your concerns, and those are being taken into consideration as the staff develop their recommendations.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor, for your help. The planning director is now going to reveal the list of notes that he got from all of the delegations. Mr. Simeone.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I was careful to note the following, and just for the benefit of those listening, this is a recommendation for council to receive it, and in addition, staff have been directed by council to specifically look at the matters that I've highlighted here this evening. So we have sun and shadow study. In addition, there was a reference, Councillor Adams, about a wind tunnel effect. You'd like us to have a look at that. Traffic impact study, part of the application, will consider, among other matters, the parking adequacy not only for the units but also for the visitors. I have one here, and I hope I've captured it correctly. How do the townhomes blend in with the existing urban design? That was one of them. And how will, Councillor Amir, how will the commercial uses be laid out to ensure viability and variety? I think that was the list I'd take.
I would just add that it seems to me you also have to consider the impact on our ability to support transit. Councillor Knoll.
One that I had mentioned later on in the third or fourth comment about parking, and that is the commercial parking, specifically carved out of the whole parking issue, is how to manage that commercial parking piece.
You've heard our cry on many occasions, fix parking. All right, it's moved by Councillor Knoll. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that carries. Now, for something different, we have a recommendation report. This is a public meeting and recommendation report on a temporary use zoning bylaw amendment for MGO lease at 87 Dundas Street East. And if you give your attention to Jeff Adma, he will summarize for the public what you on council have studied so thoroughly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. As the mayor has indicated, this is a combined statutory public meeting and recommendation report. The report can be found on page 67 of tonight's agenda. The purpose of the report is to first introduce the planning application for a temporary use bylaw for 87 Dundas Street East in conjunction with the required statutory public meeting, and second, present staff's recommendation for the application submitted by MGO Lease Limited for a zoning bylaw amendment to permit a temporary new home sales office on the property. This application was deemed complete on January 19, 2018 after royal assent, and within 150 days would mean that our council is required to make a decision by May 21st. I believe we meet that deadline tonight. The lands are located in North Oakville, north of Dundas Street East, and east of Post Road, with the municipal address of 87 Dundas Street East. The new Halton Region Police Services building is located directly across the street to the south. A temporary sales office for Fernbrook Homes is located immediately west of the property, between the property and Post Road. And on the lands directly east of the property, the town is currently processing a site plan application for the development of 2 6-story apartment buildings with a number of 2-story townhouses and behind. And I believe a resident was gracious enough to bring a rendering of that project before you earlier this evening. The purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment is to allow a temporary sales center on the property from which to market new homes for sale in the MGO subdivision, which you can see on the slide before you. The MGO subdivision along 6th Line was draft approved by the OMB on May 4, 2017. The applicant is proposing to locate their sales center off-site rather than on the MGO subdivision lands for 2 reasons. One, 6th Line itself, which is the road that runs right here from Burnhamthorpe down to Dundas and beyond, but that section between Dundas and Burnhamthorpe is proposed to be reconstructed between 2018 and the year 2021,
which would mean that a sales center within the subdivision itself would either be inaccessible or suffer from poor access for the next 3 years. And two, a holding provision was placed on the MGO subdivision as part of the approval at the OMB to ensure that the phasing policies of the North Oakville East Secondary Plan are met, which prevents building permits from being issued within the subdivision itself until those policies are met. It is anticipated that these phasing policies can be met potentially later on this year, and as such, the developers and home builders would like to begin marketing homes in advance of that date, but are unable to develop a sales center within the subdivision itself because they can't get building permits within that subdivision. The sales center is to be located along Dundas Street with surface parking beside and behind the building. You can see on the right-hand side, the gray area is the proposed sales office with parking behind and access out to Post Road. The sales center will be subject to the site plan approval process. Specifics of the development, such as ensuring the access road and a lot of the site details, will be dealt with through that site plan process. The zoning bylaw amendment is intended to permit the sales center use for a 3-year duration on the property. And it also sets out setbacks and other site specifics for that sales center. The lands are designated as Dundas Urban Core in the North Oakville East Secondary Plan and is zoned existing development. The temporary sales office is only being requested as an interim use for a period of 3 years on the subject lands and does not represent the ultimate development of the lands in accordance with the secondary plan. Staff are of the opinion that a temporary sales office on the subject site for that 3-year period will not constrain the ultimate development of the lands under the Dundas Urban Core designation and would be appropriate. In conclusion, staff are recommending that comments be received from the public, and staff are of the opinion that the proposed temporary use bylaw to permit the sales office on the subject site is appropriate as outlined in the planning staff report, and recommend that the application be approved. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Abma. Council, we have no registered delegations on this file. Councillor Grant?
Barring any questions from council, this seems somewhat benign, so I'll be willing to move it when the time's appropriate.
Councillor Lischenna?
Jeff, could you just confirm there is no entrance from Dundas? Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. The access will be from Post Road.
Great, thank you.
Are there members of the public with information for council on this file? Madam Clerk, I see none. It's moved by Councillor Grant. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. That brings us to item number 4. And item number 4 is also a recommendation report. And this is the Employment and Commercial Review and Town-Initiated Official Plan Amendment. And if you give your attention to Leslie Gill Woods, she will edify you as to what we're up to here. Or tell us.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. The staff report for item 4, which is the final report about the town's employment commercial review, may be found on page 79 of tonight's agenda. And the bylaw to adopt the town-initiated OPA 26, which is one of the outcomes of the project, is on page 491. First, some context. The Employment and Commercial Review is intended to assist council in planning for employment and commercial growth townwide to the year 2041 and beyond. As noted in the staff report, prior to the November 2017 statutory public meeting, the majority of the reports related to this project were provided to the Livable Oakville Council Subcommittee. And over the course of the review, Council also adopted the urban structure shown here in conformity with the 2017 growth plan. And I'll just note that employment areas are identified in blue and major commercial areas are shown in bright pink, while other commercial uses are provided for within the nodes and corridors identified and within the residential areas. So through the Employment and Commercial Review that dates back to about 2015, we looked at a number of things. In the early stages of the review, we retained Dillon Consulting and a supporting team that provided the technical analysis that is the basis of this review, and we've reported previously on the findings in relation to commercial and employment. We've also received conversion requests, received a lot of input from stakeholders, the subcommittee and staff. As a result of the technical analysis, we landed on some policy directions that also provided direction to our further work. We were impacted by the province's review of their plans, including the approval of the 2017 growth plan, and also, as I mentioned, the town's 2017 urban structure. But through all of this, there were themes that came out of the review, and they were these 6 major ideas: to protect employment lands, to identify priority areas for major office uses, to encourage intensification of employment and commercial uses in existing areas, to provide opportunities to secure commercial development to support the development of complete communities, particularly in North Oakville, to develop a monitoring program that recognizes the evolving nature of employment and commercial lands, and to harmonize employment area planning policies. And this, again, is in relation to North Oakville and having a consistent approach townwide. So in the staff report, you'll see that I've talked about 4 key outcomes of the project that have been organized by the themes I just mentioned. I'm going to focus tonight on the recommended official plan amendment number 26 to the Livable Oakville Plan, which you'll see at bylaw 2018-54 and also in Appendix B. And also I'll focus on the recommended position with respect to employment land conversions. The policy directions for related projects were received by Council back in November, and I just want to assure Council and those present that work will continue from the Employment and Commercial Review. So those threads will be picked up through the North Oakville Secondary Plans Review, the Midtown Oakville Review, the Transportation Policy Paper, and other matters we're looking at through the Official Plan Review. But they were often cases, issues or directions that were more appropriately dealt with looking at a specific geographic area instead of townwide. There's also recommendation for additional work to be undertaken resulting from this study, and the first being a zoning bylaw amendment to implement official plan amendment number 26, should it be adopted by council and approved by the region, and also a study of community commercial sites, which is to address growing interest in the redevelopment of those sites to provide for some mixed-use development. So let's talk about OPA 26. OPA 26 proposes changes to commercial and employment-related policies and designations in the Livable Oakville Plan to implement study findings. The first statutory public meeting was held November 6th, and Appendix B of the report highlights the text changes since the first draft. With respect to employment-related matters, the OPA generally directs new major office to appropriate locations. It modifies the office employment designation. So really, we're reframing, particularly the office employment and business employment designations to make, in simple terms, the office employment designation more office-focused or office-y, and provide the business employment designation in areas formerly designated office employment, and it's a very flexible designation, so that was thought to be appropriate. We're also updating the business commercial policies with respect to their planned function, and updating employment land conversion policies consistent with the 2017 growth plan, and also updating certain designations in specific locations and use permissions and definitions to recognize oftentimes existing uses or recent approvals. With respect to commercial changes in the OPA, it adds a policy to address applications for official plan amendments affecting community commercial sites. This is in advance of that further study that is also recommended, sort of as an interim measure. And that refers to the policies to address official plan amendments that were approved through the urban structure official plan amendment. The OPA would also clarify the scale of retail and service commercial uses on sites designated neighborhood commercial, identify the neighborhood commercial lands at Trafalgar Road and Cornwall Road as an area for further study. This is the area around Englehart. And it also updates certain use permissions. The following slides go through the schedule changes, and I wasn't going to talk about each specific change. I'll just highlight a few things. So this is Schedule F in Southwest Oakville. So here you'll see the change from office employment along the south side of Spears Road, for example, to the business employment. So we're maintaining existing uses. Here, the designation changes. There's still a restriction on outside storage next to residential. In the triangle over by Great Lakes Boulevard, we're recognizing the existing stormwater management pond. We're aligning the business commercial designation at the corner of Rebecca with the property boundary. And we're providing for some additional business commercial in that little triangle at the intersection. A similar minor expansion to business commercial is proposed opposite Maple Grove Village Mall, and that's affecting only the former bank/drive examination center, which was purpose-built as more of a business commercial use. In the west area, we're recognizing the regional center and providing designations that are appropriate for that building. And then again, along the north side of the QEW, the switch from office employment to business employment. And then in the central area, expansion of the business commercial designation at Iroquois Shore and Trafalgar to recognize existing business commercial uses. And then there's also a special provision, or special exception policy rather, added to recognize the repair facility at the Canadian Tire store in Uptown. So this looks a little messy, but it's really recognizing existing things in the northwest part. So the hydro corridor lands, we weren't showing them accurately, or the Parkway Belt hydro corridor lands. So that has been expanded to reflect those lands there. There's also a minor expansion to business commercial south of the core commercial site up there. Along Upper Middle Road, we're recognizing the approved plan of subdivision and zoning in that area. And then you'll see also where office employment is being changed to business employment to reflect the new direction for the office employment designation in conformity with the growth plan. Next up, I want to talk about employment land conversion requests. And as reported previously, the town has a healthy supply of employment land, and conversions are to be limited in accordance with local, regional, and provincial policies. The analysis of the requests submitted to the town is provided in Appendix F, and there were 3 types of requests: employment to non-employment, employment to employment, which is blue to blue in our local terminology, and also requests to remove the employment overlay, or remove specific properties from the employment overlay in the regional official plan. So as noted in the report, and as you are aware, map 1 of the regional official plan identifies an employment area overlay, and the majority of our employment lands are within that overlay. And I also note here that some type 2 changes, the blue to blue or business employment to business commercial changes, are included in the proposed OPA 26, as I just highlighted. So if acceptable to Council, Appendix F, along with the relevant supporting material, would be provided as input into Halton Region's Municipal Comprehensive Review. Their official plan review has been recently initiated, and they will be looking at employment lands on a regional scale. Amendments to the town's official plan must conform to the regional official plan, so this council can't support or approve an amendment to convert lands unless it conforms with the regional plan. And as I mentioned, in most cases, the town's employment lands are within the employment overlay identified on map 1 of the regional plan. So just before I move into the recommendation, I wanted to note that the comments received throughout the employment commercial review are summarized in Appendix D, along with staff's responses on how they were to be dealt with, either through the 4 streams I mentioned earlier in the study outcomes or otherwise. And the written submissions received throughout 2017 and up to the date of the report are provided in Appendix E as submitted to the town. And the clerk has distributed the correspondence received since then. So before you is the recommendation to approve the proposed town-initiated official plan amendment on the basis that it is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to all applicable provincial plans, Halton's regional official plan and the Livable Oakville plan, and has regard for matters of provincial interest and represents good planning for the reasons set out in the report. And to adopt that bylaw, we're recommending the passage of, to adopt that official plan amendment, we're recommending the passage of bylaw 2018-054. And then there's further recommendations about the notice of the decision and also about Appendix F, the conversion analysis, and then the final recommendation 5 for the additional work arising from the study. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much for your summary of the matter. Council, of course, is, as you mentioned, seen this quite a lot. There are no registered delegation, Council. Do you have questions? Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, staff, for the work. I know it's been daunting at times. Over the course of the public consultations, I heard a few times from business owners and also property owners along Spears Road about the changing nature of what is actually happening with e-commerce and this mix of retail, shipping, warehousing, manufacturing. I'm wondering if you might be able to tell us how we've incorporated the changing business dynamic in what we're doing here, either by the business employment or the business commercial changes, or how we're going to be able to work with the businesses to recognize how we allow for those dynamic changes that happen, that are happening and have been happening over the past few years with our business element on Spears Road and throughout the area.
Okay, I'll try. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor O'Meara. So what you have before you tonight is a package deal. So the adoption of OPA 26 for the broad employment commercial OPA is required before you can adopt the Spears Road Amendment, which is coming up next after me, OPA 27. So the switch to the business employment designation, I feel, is appropriate. It's the most flexible designation. It provides the greatest variety of opportunities for business and for business-related uses. And then Brad, through my colleague Brad Sunderland, through OPA 27, is proposing changes that specifically address the unique nature of the Spears Road corridor and the mix of uses we see there, and to provide for them. Town-wide, the broad application of that business employment designation, I think, is appropriate, and really we've tried to scope the office employment designation to specific areas because the growth plan has really narrowed what constitutes major office, and so we're trying to direct that to areas with access to transit, but we're also recognizing existing locations for major office.
I thank you for that, and I think you guys have got a good mix here, and I appreciate the work on that, and I know that some of the business owners have reflected those comments to me as well, so thank you very much. Thank you, Worship.
Councillor O'Meara, are you satisfied enough to move it?
Certainly.
Thank you. Are there members of the public with information for the committee, or for council on this file? Sir? Would you just identify yourself for the clerk, and we look forward to your information.
Yes, my name is Joel Farber. I actually made written submissions to the clerk and identified the fact that I intended to make a deputation here tonight.
Well, in any event, you're welcome now.
Thank you, Your Worship. My name is Joel Farber. I'm a solicitor with the firm Fogler Rubinoff, and I act for RioCan Real Estate Investment Trust. RioCan is the owner of the Oakville Place Mall, and I did make written submissions at the initial public meeting, which was back in 2017, and I followed up with written submissions to the council earlier this week or last week. The intention and my request for you is to examine the special policy that I had submitted with my correspondence on November 3rd. I didn't see it reflected or addressed really in the staff report from Ms. Gill Woods. The idea behind it is to implement the planning vision that's grown out of the town studies that started all the way back in 2013. In 2013, the town initiated the Trafalgar Road corridor study. And through that study, Oakville Place was recognized as one of the key sites, the key redevelopment opportunity sites. In fact, it was the #1 site identified in that study for mixed-use intensification. The site has a tremendous opportunity for redevelopment and intensification to house apartment buildings, additional offices, additional commercial uses. The site was built in, I think, 1981, and the site is ready to grow and to maintain its position as a critical and core component in Oakville's town structure. So it's recognized by the consultants in 2014 and by staff, and I think that the words used were a great redevelopment opportunity, but nothing is advanced in the Trafalgar Road corridor study to deal with it. We were, of course, involved. My office was involved, and then the client, Mr. Wisnowski, who's here with me today. We were involved in 2013 through the Trafalgar Road corridor study, asking the town to take some initiative and take some action and get this thing on the radar so that we could begin the process of transforming the planning policies and the planning framework that's applicable to the site from its core commercial designation. And we ended up appealing OPA 5, and we resolved that appeal by a settlement with the town. And that settlement was predicated on the fact that the opportunities for redevelopment were to be addressed in this ECR. And so here we are in this ECR, but regrettably, there hasn't been the assessment that was part and parcel of the understanding that we had come to in trying to address that. But nothing's changed really on the ground except for, the site is, again, is ready to be redeveloped and intensified. And the landscape, the retail landscape over that time has changed significantly, and it's, continues to evolve. RioCan spent about $40 million doing interior mall renovations, and I think if you go there and you see how good it looks inside, and then after making that investment, RioCan, has the Sears news, so now we have to deal with more changes. Suffice to say that the retail industry is very dynamic. It changes all the time, and we need to be able to be responsive to opportunities. So we've been patient through the 5 years, waiting to see what the outcome of the ECR was in terms of examining opportunities for redevelopment to the site. But unfortunately, it doesn't get, I think, the recognition or the attention that it deserves in the ECR. And the ECR was this is an important town-wide planning initiative, and there is, in my submission, sort of a missed opportunity if we don't address Oakville Place in this process. So my ask of you is to examine that special policy. It doesn't contradict or offend anything in the regional official plan. The regional official plan does have this employment area overlay in it. Staff and I are all in agreement that that's an error. The core commercial designation has never been part of the town's employment designations, nor has it ever been part of a regional employment designation. In terms of Halton region. It's never been recognized as an industrial area or a business area. So I'd ask you to take a look at that special policy. Again, the policy simply says that when the proposed policy says that when the regional employment overlay is removed, then the site can be considered for residential intensification and additional commercial intensification. And it's not, in my submission, doesn't offend anything that the region is doing or should do, but it recognizes the fact that we're all here sort of tied because of this error. But this is too significant an opportunity to waste away another 5 or 10 years waiting for somebody to fix an error when we have this tremendous opportunity to promote the future planning framework for this site. So those would be my submissions, Your Worship, members of the council. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time and your information, sir. Council, have you any questions for the gentleman? Councillor Elgar?
So have you talked to staff about this recently?
We've been in communications with staff throughout the process, going back all the way to Trafalgar Road corridor study in 2013.
So what are staff saying to you now?
Staff feel that their hands are tied because of the regional official plan, and I don't accept that. I think the town can be more proactive and lead the way to deal with this important site. It's it's not a regional issue. It's really a local issue. Trafalgar Road has gone through a tremendous amount of work. The town's invested a lot of money in Trafalgar Road, the corridor study, the urban structure amendment, which it recently did, which identified Trafalgar Road as the node and corridor, the strategic growth area, and we're just trying to sort of get in that program, but we've been frustrated.
So, but you're aware the existing local plan says it's core commercial?
Yes.
And the zoning is core commercial, is a special provision 49?
Correct.
You do know that?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? All right, it's been moved by Councillor O'Meara. Any speakers? All in favor? Councillor Knoll.
Is it possible to get the staff to respond to that last comment before we vote?
Absolutely.
Staff, have you made an error?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I
just don't like
just
leaving
had all
that
my
hanging
pages
there, that's
tabbed
all.
and then I dropped them. So certainly we're aware of the potential in the Oakville Place site. It was identified through the Trafalgar Road corridor study. And we are recommending through this in Appendix F that in accordance with RioCan's request, the region remove the site from their employment area overlay. It's our position that council can't deal with an official plan amendment or zoning bylaw amendment for that site until that's gone. So having an additional policy in our plan really doesn't advance that cause because it just can't be dealt with till the region's plan is cleaned up.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted that on the record, that's all. I just wanted to make sure it was clear.
All right, thank you. Councillor Grant, what have you got?
Nothing, just to support what Ms. Gilbert was saying. It is on page 208 where it's mentioned that staff does support the removal. And I'm not quite sure where this mistake or error was made. It looks like everything's moving.
Thank you, one and all. And thank you, Councillor Elgar. I thought you kind of dealt with it, but anyway, we've all dealt with it now. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that amendment is adopted. Thank you. Madam Commissioner, just for the benefit of the public and council, could you remind everybody what the time frame for the regional municipality of Halton's MCR is? Is this a 50-year project? When will, how does this, what's ahead? And when is it done?
So we understand from the region that they've initiated their plan reviews, their municipal comprehensive review, and they've indicated that they expect to have that review completed by 2020.
Thank you kindly. Council, let's turn our attention to item number 5, a public meeting and another recommendation report. The town initiated official plan amendment for the Spears Road corridor study, which is another matter that we've extensively been through. But if you give your, and especially if the members of the public And those watching at home will give their attention to Brad Sunderland. He will summarize for everyone the matter. Mr. Sunderland, we are all ears now.
So thank you, Your Worship, and members of council. The public meeting and recommendation report on the town-initiated official plan amendment for the Spears Road corridor is item 5 of tonight's agenda and can be found on page 243 of the agenda package. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to present the recommended official plan amendment for the Spears Road corridor special policy area, provide an opportunity for comment, and to bring forward the amendment for council's consideration for adoption. So the need to complete the Spears Road corridor study is identified in the Livable Oakville plan, and in May of 2015, staff determined that the study would be undertaken as part of the official plan review, the 5-year official plan review, in coordination with the town-wide employment and commercial review, which was just previously discussed. Throughout 2017, the study progressed, with staff bringing forward draft directions and draft policies to the Livable Oakville Council Subcommittee, holding various public consultation opportunities, including 3 public information meetings where more than 50 people attended, and a statutory public meeting of Planning and Development Council, which was held on November 6th of 2017, where comments were received on the draft official plan amendment. Resulting from the review of technical and public comments received, including comments provided by Halton Region staff in early 2018, staff have made modifications to the recommended official plan amendment, which are discussed in the staff report and shown in the appended track change document to the staff report. Many of the modifications are in response to Halton Region staff comments, which reinforce the Spears Road corridor as an employment area and a strategic growth area as identified in the Halton Region official plan, including the need to further study the Bronte-Go major transit station area in coordination with Halton Region and their official plan review process as directed by the provincial growth plan. Other modifications to the recommended official plan amendment include removing the definition of major retail in coordination with the employment and commercial official plan amendment, which includes the same definition. And in response to public comments, the minimum building height policy has been revised from a requirement of a minimum building height to more of an encouraging policy for a minimum building height within an intensification context, and that's to reflect the diverse range of employment uses that are anticipated along the corridor. And this also changes the associated implementation policies. Lastly, the policy regarding legal non-conforming uses has been removed as staff reviewed it, and it was duplicative of existing implementation policies within the Livable Oakville plan, so it wasn't required. And so with these changes, staff are putting forward a recommended official plan amendment for council's consideration and adoption, which in the opinion of staff is consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms to the provincial plans, as well as the Halton Region official plan and the town's Livable Oakville plan. Of particular note with regard to the town's Livable Oakville plan is the council-adopted urban structure. The urban structure sets out the town's foundational elements for growth and development-related decision-making and directing where and how growth is to be accommodated, including a framework for employment areas. In regard to the Spears Road corridor, the urban structure identifies the Spears Road corridor as an employment area, an employment mixed-use corridor, a major transportation corridor, and a regional transit priority corridor, which are highlighted on the map and circled. These foundational elements have been woven into the recommended policies for the Spears Road corridor special policy area. The policies applicable to the Spears Road corridor apply to the areas shown on this map, which are generally bound by the railway tracks to the north, just west of Kerr Street in the east end of the study area, the boundary between the existing employment area and the area and the residential areas to the south, and Bronte Creek in the west end of the subject lands. So the policies before you this evening are drafted to be included in section 26 of the Livable Oakville plan, which is with regard to special policy areas. And the policy framework provides a goal statement, objectives, and a development concept for the area, which are supported by functional, land use, and implementation policies. The goal statement for Spears Road is that the corridor will support the town's urban structure as an intensification corridor and a regional transit priority corridor, which will be a multimodal, transit-supportive employment area where a wide range and mix of business and economic activities can thrive. The objectives help to achieve this goal by recognizing the unique context of Spears Road within the Oakville context and setting the stage to permit a wider range and mix of business and economic activities. Supporting Spears Road as an intensification corridor by enabling conditions to support appropriate employment intensification, and supporting Spears Road as a regional transit priority corridor by setting a framework for the necessary transportation improvements to take place over time with an emphasis on transit and active transportation. The functional policies provided guide how the functional aspects of the corridor and future development will work. With regard to transportation, the policies help to guide the evolving transportation needs for Spears Road, including protecting for future road improvements in active transportation. And in regard to parking, the policies guide the provision of private parking, including the preferred location of parking areas to the side and rear of buildings, encouraging reduced or shared driveway access points from Spears Road onto private property where this is possible, and encouraging shared parking areas between properties where this is possible and supported by study. In regard to urban design, the policies help guide the design of new development, including ways to ensure new development is transit supportive, provides for a compact built form, and is compatible with the adjacent residential areas to the south, and that includes policies around the transition of building heights, building separation distances, as well as landscape buffering. In regard to accommodating intensification, the policies help guide employment growth by encouraging land assembly to allow for comprehensive site design and development, and encouraging minimum building heights of 2 stories for new development where this is feasible and possible, and support for increased employment densities in general. And in regard to providing a minimum density, this policy implements a directive of the Provincial Growth Plan, which states that Halton Region is to assign minimum employment densities to employment areas in coordination with the town. The land use policies provided in the recommended official plan amendment permit an expanded range of uses within each land use designation found along the corridor and allow for a mix of employment uses, including arterial commercial uses, which is a newly defined term proposed as part of the amendment and specific to Spears Road. The additional use permissions are intended to reflect the types of uses already found along Spears Road today and would be subject to a size threshold, which is a requirement of the growth plan. And major retail uses continue to be prohibited. Arterial commercial uses contemplated within the official plan policy context are anticipated to be further refined as part of an implementing zoning bylaw, which are to be brought forward at a future date and coordinated with some of the larger zoning amendments with the employment and commercial review. The implementation policies within the policies specific to Spears introduce a new criteria to evaluate consent applications to ensure that land divisions don't preclude comprehensive site design or development or restrict intensification from taking place. And phasing and transition policies are provided to recognize that development will occur over the long term and is to be coordinated with the provision of infrastructure. And they are also set out to protect for the Brontigo major transit station area, which will be the subject of a future study as part of the official plan review. The OPA, the official plan amendment rather, also intends to coordinate our planning and development activities with other programs and initiatives, including linking our land use policies with any economic development strategies, community improvement plans for brownfield redevelopment, and further updates in consultation with Halton Region and the region's ongoing official plan review. So this map was touched on a little bit in the previous presentation provided by Leslie Gilwoods, but 2 schedules within the Livable Oakville Plan are proposed to be amended, which would add a special policy area boundary to the lands pertaining to Spears Road, and this really indicates that there are additional policies applicable to this area for the special policy area. A few exception bullets are proposed to be removed, as given there's now additional land use permissions along the corridor, those exceptions are no longer required given that they would be permitted. And also proposed to change, which Leslie highlighted, is the and excuse me that the arrows are pointing to the wrong location. I just realized this. It should be a little further to the south, pointing at that light blue area on the south side of Spears Road, and that's just indicating that that area is changing from office employment to the business employment designation, and that's happening through the employment and commercial review, which was just discussed. And the second map is just the tail end of Spears Road that's also captured within the special policy area. So with that, the town's putting forward the recommendations that are provided in your staff report this evening, and that's for the town-initiated official plan amendment be approved on the basis that it's consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms to all applicable provincial plans and the Region of Halton official plan, and the Livable Oakville plan, and has regard for matters of provincial interest, and represents good planning for the reasons set out in the staff report. And the second two are just the adoption of the bylaw, which brings forward the OPA, and that council's decision reflect that matters of written and oral submissions related to this study have been appropriately addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Sunderland. Council, we have no listed delegations. I will poll the audience. Do you have any questions? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sir, when was the last time that staff, or council included, completed as thorough a review of this part of Spears Road as this concludes? When was the last time?
Through you, Your Worship, I don't recall a land use study being done with regard to land use designations like this before. That said, there was previous studies that informed this back in the 1970s and 80s. There was a buffer study that was looked at, which identified that landscaping would be required, a buffer on the adjacent to the residential uses. But outside of that, I don't believe there has been.
So you're going to tell the councillor that it was before his time?
So, Your Worship, I would just like to say that at the appropriate time, I'd like to move this. I think this is an amazing and a lot of work that's been accomplished recently, and it should have been done a long time ago, but here it is, and it's badly needed, and I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. I recognize your motion, but let's see what else we've got from other councillors. Councillor Elgar.
Thank you for the presentation. A lot of work has gone into this, I realize. Words I heard you say, and just summarizing, you mentioned consistent, conform, but then you said, what was it we just have regard to? What was that one of the last sentences you said, have regard to?
Through Your Worship, it's regard to matters of provincial interest, and those matters are set out in the Planning Act.
But we're consistent with consistent with the PPS, and we conform to the new growth plan. But we're only have regard to what are those matters?
Through you, Your Worship, I don't have them on hand. There is quite a long list of matters. I think it's listed alphabetically A through M or N in the Planning Act. Have them actually. I think I summarized them in the staff report now that I...
Okay, no, it's okay. I'm just curious. We met the two plans we have to meet, and now you just got me interested in having regard to. That's fine. The other thing I'd like to say is I'd like to thank you for putting in the words, and it jumped off that we're saying minimum targets now, not minimum forecasts in the report, and I thank you for putting that in. Thanks. Some of the councillors may know what I'm referring to over the years. Thanks.
Commissioner.
Just to clear up the have regard, it's section 2 of the Planning Act, and it lists a variety of things that in terms of community building, protecting the natural environment. I think it even mentioned aggregates in there somewhere, but it has a variety of things. The Planning Act requires that we have regard to. So that specific word is really taken out of the act.
Councillor O'Meara.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for the work you guys have done here, and especially deleting the section on the shall versus the may. I think that had some hesitations with some of the existing businesses in my ward in particular. One part I'd like to ask you a question about, I've been trying to carry this football forward through this whole process in terms of pedestrian access onto Spears Road. As we go forward with the Brawny Go Station review, we are going to have opportunities present themselves where the land on the south side will be changing, and we might only have an opportunity at one time to do those sorts of sort of ingresses into the Go Station. I see on page 281 on section 26.4.4C where it talks about, you know, adjacent residential areas where opportunities exist. And my question is that wording strong enough to give staff a directive if they have to move forward with perhaps a land acquisition to put a passageway forward across to Spears Road? Is that language strong enough? I don't want to have these two opportunities syncing each other if the areas around the Brawny Go Station goes and we haven't given staff enough direction to just do a little more than sit back and hope that it works out. Is that language strong enough to go and actively pursue a pedestrian crossway into to where the Brawny Go Station is?
Through you, Your Worship. I do know that the area around the Bronte Go Station will be subject to a further study, and ultimately we'll have another set of policies and plans in place that will have to be developed, and potentially through that process we can look at making stronger language, if that's what you would like to see, where there are opportunities for pedestrian connections into the adjacent residential area. I think at this point in time, given that these are policies applicable to Spears Road as the entire corridor, it's 6 kilometers long, there's few opportunities that we identified through the study, given that most of the properties that back onto the employment area are all single detached homes and existing residences where there isn't any really area to provide for that pedestrian connection. So I think at this time that language is sufficient in the OPA, and I think that specifically to the Brawny Go Station area where there's going to be potentially a different form taking place, which we have to determine still through that process, there may be opportunities to explore that further.
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor, we've learned through bitter experience that we don't want to be too eager to create every possible cut through. We often find ourselves trying to close them down because of problems they create. So, but Mr. Sunderland's answer was, I think, very good. Councillor Chisholm.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through Brad, I've been involved with this for the last 2 years, and I know other councillors have been longer on this, and I'm very pleased in how this come out. This is a very unique situation with the existing land uses on Spears Road now, and I know there has been a lot of threat to some of the business owners and what was coming down. So I'm really impressed with the 3 areas that you've designed through the corridor, so there are mixed uses and so forth. So they're not one blanket or universal thrown on Spears Road corridor, and that's the way it's going to be. You've taken the time, the staff have taken the time to really look at the issues and look at the challenges they have, and I must commend staff for this report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Chisholm. Are there members of the public with information for council on this matter? Madam Clerk, I see none. Which of you who are so happy with this is moving it? Oh, sorry. I didn't see you.
Oh, thank you.
Well, I did say I didn't see you. Anyway, please introduce yourself and share your information.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Rick Metelja. My address is 79 Wilson Street, Oakville, Ontario, Suite 301. I just through you, Your Worship, I have a question for staff. It's in regard to Schedule F, which I've shown here on the overhead. There are 3 red circles on the. Well, actually, there's 3 red circles. 2 on the south side of Spears Road, 1 on the north side of Spears Road, and I'm unclear what the implication of those circles is. And through you, Ed, I wonder if we could have an explanation from staff as to what those are.
I'm pretty sure he has an answer for that.
Through you, Your Worship. So those 3 circles if you can see a little further down the corridor, there's a black circle with a dot in the middle, and those are exceptions. And typically those are set up to recognize something that wouldn't otherwise be permitted in that area. They're an exception to the rule, essentially. And so through the policies that we put forward, because we are expanding the land use permissions on many of these properties, the exception is no longer an exception. And so the uses that are there and recognized through that exception policy are now permitted within the parent document. So they're no longer needed to be identified as any special recognition. It's permitted.
Okay, thank you. So then from the standpoint of a landowner there, the presence of that circle doesn't change their rights to use and to develop their property as indicated by the rest of the document.
Through your worship, with the special policy area, it is recognizing those additional uses as being permitted. So in this instance, removing it doesn't change the permissions. We're actually adding.
Okay, thank you very much.
I gather that was a good answer.
Yes, it was. Thank you.
Thank you very much for asking.
Thank you.
Council, which of you is so happy as, Councilor Robinson is moving, I forgot already. All right, any other speakers, questions? All those in favor? Any opposed? No, wait, what's,
Your
Councilor Duddick?
Worship, I believe there was a lady who was hopefully going to try and speak.
Oh. Well, come on down.
Anne-Marie Mason with Champion Pet Foods. We're at 579 Spears Road. I was just wanting to get clarification on item 5. Is that solely dealing with the land use and not the widening of Spears Road? Is that a separate issue altogether?
That's a separate issue.
Thank you.
Was that a good answer?
That's a great answer.
We're giving out good answers tonight. Oh, wait, we've inspired a hand. Sir, please come and introduce yourself and provide us with your information.
Hi, good evening, Worship and Council. My name is Dave Randall-Gann, and it's my wife, Kirsten Randall-Gann. We reside behind the south side of Spears Road. We're on Pine Grove, so we're in Ward 2. We've been there for a while, and we got this notice, and we're not quite sure exactly how it's going to impact us as residents, as long as also with all the other people on our street. We know there's development. I'm curious to what time frame it is, and like I said, how it affects our backyard space, our privacy. Also, there's we back onto the green belt area, so that area is very special to us, and we cherish it. And there's a lot of wildlife in there too, which is spectacular. And we're just wondering how that's going to impact us, if at all, and know what time frame.
Well, first, before Brad answers your main question, I'll just volunteer. Any greenbelt's very precious to council too, and probably the entire rest of the town.
Sure, yeah.
Brad?
Through you, your worship. So the intent of this special policy area and the study that went forward is to really put in place the guide for how we will assess development applications when they come forward. So this is putting the policies in place that will enable certain things to happen, restrict other things from happening. And so we do have policies around landscape buffering on the south side of those properties, which abut all the residential areas. So we're putting those policies in place to say to any, if any of the private landowners in that employment area do come forward and they put an application to redevelop their property to something else, these are the new rules that would apply we would assess any application coming forward. So really this is ensuring that we're getting the best result for when redevelopment comes forward. If it comes forward, we can apply these policies to get the best result out of that development. So this is a very long term. So this isn't, the development's not happening tomorrow. These are policies in place that are really intended to be, to 2041 timeframe over the course of.
So it's kind of the planting of the seeds of the potential.
Evolution of
right.
Okay, so just to clarify, what kind of notice residences would get if there was an upcoming proposal for developmental changes with the businesses behind us?
So through you, Your Worship, as part of any individual development application, I believe it's 150 or 120 meters, 120 meters from the property line of that property that's proposed to be redeveloped. A notice gets sent to anyone within that buffer area, and a notice is also placed in the Oakville Beaver every time there's a development application coming forward. And we have a process where there's a public information meeting where you can come out and learn about that, what the proposed changes are. And then there's a statutory public meeting at council where you can, similar forum to this, you can provide your input, similar to what you've seen tonight.
Okay, thank you.
In theory, you shouldn't have any surprises. Councillor Duddick, did you have a question?
Didn't have a question, just wanted to re-emphasize the fact that the south portion of Spears has been identified by staff and by the ward councillors to be sensitive to the transition from residential to whatever's planned for those particular sites, and that those uses are compatible as best they can be with residential uses, so it's not the same on the north side. Okay?
Wonderful. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
So that was a good answer too?
Very good.
3 in a row. All right. Thank you very much. All right. Anyone else? I'm looking really carefully. Ma'am?
My name is Sandra McIntosh, and I've been in Oakville for over 40 years, and I'm not sure, but I don't think I'll be here to see what's happening to Spears Road. But I just felt it was my responsibility to just mention the homeowners that are south of Spears Road, and I'm not one of them, but I would hope that you had mentioned 2 stories, and hopefully that would be the case. But if they're planning to build hotels and entertainment centers and sports centers and whatever that came up in the presentation, they're not going to be 2 stories, obviously. And I can only ask that those places be kept away from the backyards of those homes. Well, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Brad, do you have anything to illuminate that? All right, so no answer.
No answer, that one.
We'll take that as instruction. All right, anyone else? All right, I'm going to put Councillor Robinson's motion to a vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Congratulations, everyone. Number 6 is also a recommendation report, and this time we get Jeff back. And this is the plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment for the Halton Catholic District School Board Coronation Drive property.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. This report can be found on page 305 of tonight's agenda. The purpose of this report, I believe it is up on your screens. We're just not seeing it up above here yet. The purpose of this report is to present staff's recommendation for the application submitted by Halton Catholic District School Board and Menkes Developments for a plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment. The property is a vacant surplus school site located west of Coronation Drive, south of Northridge Trail. The site comprises an area of 2.7 hectares with 134 meters of frontage along Coronation Drive. The site is currently vacant. Residential detached homes surround the property on all sides that are predominantly 2 stories in height, although there are a few single-story homes. Northridge Trail Park is located kitty corner from the site across Coronation Drive to the northeast. The site is currently owned by the Halton Catholic District School Board. The school board has determined this to be surplus site. The school board has followed the established legislative protocol set out by the province in dealing with surplus school lands, and they have now reached the stage where the site can now be offered for sale to a third party. The school board is currently in negotiations with Menkes Developments for the purchase of the subject site, and the proposal being presented tonight has been submitted by Menkes Developments with the permission of the school board. The lands are designated as low-density residential in the Livable Oakville official plan. The official plan represents the town's intentions on how these lands could be developed over time, and the low-density designation permits detached homes, semi-detached, and duplex dwellings with a density of up to 29 units per site hectare. The effect of the proposed development, or the proposal here tonight, would be to accommodate detached dwellings only at a density of 23 units per hectare. And this proposal conforms to the livable Oakville official plan designation for the site. The applicant has submitted a plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment to develop 48 detached dwellings, as I said, at a density of 23 units per net hectare. The proposal is for dwellings to front onto Coronation Drive on the east. New public street will connect from Coronation Drive on the south portion of the site, and this public street will create a loop on the interior of the site with dwellings fronting onto both sides of that loop. The perimeter lots will all back on to the adjacent existing lots, which surround the site on three sides, the north, the west, and the south. And all these lots likewise back onto the subject site. The proposed plan of subdivision also proposes a walkway block to connect to an existing walkway block on Tesla Crescent. What's important to understand about this walkway block is that the region requires looped water service, and this is also used for fire service to create a looped system, and public infrastructure, where at all possible, needs to be located on public property. So the new walkway block, in addition to providing pedestrian connectivity, will house an extension of the water main to connect to the new water main in Street A. There is an existing water main on the walkway block along Tesla Crescent, and there's an easement that runs along the backs of where lots 1 to 7 are proposed. The proposal is to extend that water main through the new walkway block to Street A and decommission that line that runs along in that easement. And this will ensure water service for both the development and continue to provide the same looped system for Tesla Crescent as currently exists today. And I just thought I'd identify that one because that was something that had come up in both the public information meeting and the public stat meeting on this application. The subject lands are currently zoned CU community use. The application proposes to rezone the property from CU community use to RL8 residential low with a number of site-specific zoning regulations. And they're all broken up into 3 blocks that you see here. And they intend to regulate maximum lot area, maximum building heights, maximum residential floor area, minimum rear yard, and a number of other specifics. The site-specific regulations in the zoning bylaw amendment and the configuration of the plan of subdivision are the result of staff working with the applicant to ensure that the proposed development is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. It's important to emphasize that the applicant has made revisions to their application since their initial submission to address these compatibility concerns. A detailed discussion on the design constraints of the site and compatibility has been well documented in the planning staff report. Here's an example or an excerpt from the submitted urban design brief, which demonstrates a number of possible housing models that the applicant is considering. In conclusion, staff are recommending approval of the subdivision and the zoning bylaw amendment. The site-specific zoning bylaw amendment regulations have been drafted to establish regulations that control massing, height, and floor size to ensure compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood. The proposed development, as revised, provides an appropriate and compatible form of intensification within an established residential community. And the application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the growth plan, regional official plan, and the livable Oakville official plan. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. We have 2 listed delegations, Council. Would you like me to call the delegations before you ask questions, or would you like to go now? Councillor Elgar, away you go.
Thank you very much for the presentation. The question is just based on elevation, okay? Will the elevation for this development be similar to the elevation of the houses it's going to back onto?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, they are predominantly 2-story homes that surround the development, and in the area on the perimeter lots, the maximum height will be 2 stories as well.
Okay.
And so the elevations will be
They
like
will
for
be
like.
similar. There won't be, this will not be a higher elevation, because when you measure elevations, you do from the center at the front of the property line, okay? And I've got cases in my ward where the elevation is the same, but it's really not, because it's higher to begin with, and even though the elevation is up so many meters, and the other house is so many meters, because there's been a large incline, then everybody's looking down on the other house. But that is not the case here.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, my understanding is it's a fairly level site, and that there won't be any conditions such as a walkout basement that would increase the appearance of the rear elevation. Additionally, the site-specific zoning provisions have removed the ability to do, say, a loft, which often can create almost like the appearance of a third story from the rear of a building, and that has not been included in the zoning bylaw amendment for this subdivision to maintain that two-story look for the perimeter.
I appreciate that, because I've got that issue right now where it meets all the zoning and it is the right height, but at the back it looks like a three-story to the people that now back onto it that wasn't there before. So thank you for that. Thanks, that's all I have.
Thank you, Councillor. Madam Clerk, would you call the listed delegations?
First delegation is Tony Fragos.
Welcome, sir. Council looks forward to your information.
Tony Fregoso, I live at 2396 Tesla. I back onto the property. I actually like the new design. I don't have an issue with it. The only concern I have, and it's more of a question, I wasn't clear in the document, the middle section, is it two-story or three-story? Because the block 3, it talks about three-story. So just clarifying that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, the internal block, let me just bring up a slide that identifies those. So the block here in the center, these 8 lots, they will permit a three-story product. So it does allow for a little additional height in the middle of the development, and staff felt that that was appropriate because the perimeter at 2 stories will provide transition to that, and it will not be, it'll mitigate the impact of that little extra bit of height in the middle to the outside of the development.
The only other question would be timeline. When is it going to happen type thing?
I believe, through you, Mr. Mayor, and the applicant is here, and they can maybe perhaps give you a better specific schedule. I believe their intent is to get going on the site as soon as they can, as soon as they get their approvals in place.
But the only reason why I ask is because I'm the tree guy. They know me as a tree guy because I'm the guy who donated 2 40-foot maple trees to the Halton Catholic District School Board 7 years ago. So I understand now things have changed, and I've gotten permission to move the trees, but with the weather being so cooperative in the past few months, nobody wants to move the trees until it's dry. So I'm just kind of wondering, should I be requesting the guys to come ASAP, May, June, July, or can they wait until September, October, November? Because it makes a big difference simply because those trees are roughly 40 feet, 50 feet high. The caliper is about 7-8 inches, and to move them you need a 100-foot spade, and we're willing to pay for it because we're moving 2 trees onto our property, which will be our responsibility. But now if I move them now and you guys come in, it's always better to do it in the fall, but we never timed it well last year, and now that's why all I'm asking. When's it going to happen?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what I can do is what I can offer is to meet with you after this item has been dealt with, and I can connect you with the developer and their planning staff, and potentially you can work it out directly with them.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
Councillor Adams, don't go.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight and wading through all the other things. I know we were coming up the steps together, and we were wondering how long it would be. I just wanted to ask you quickly about the walkway. I know there was a lot of discussion about the walkway between Tesla and the new street, and understanding that there's the need for the functional water system. Are you satisfied with that outcome?
To be honest with you, I've always been an agreement for the walkway. Tesla on itself, because we call it a P, just like how the new development will be, we call it a P as well. Tesla on its own, from a car perspective, there's only one entrance and one exit. From a walkable perspective, you can't go anywhere other than use that walkway. And anyone who says that they don't use the walkway, I think it's obvious that people do use it, because whatever time they put up a fence, it's brought back down. So it is being used, and I think it's very, I actually applaud the fact that it's put in place. Some of the neighbors may not be in accordance with it, but just how it is, right? But I like it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your comment on that.
Thank you, sir. Anyone, oh, we have another delegation, right?
Yes. Next delegation is Michael Bissett.
Welcome, sir.
Good
Council
evening, Your
looks
Worship
forward
and
to your
members of
information.
council. I'm only here as a representative of Menkes with Bowesfields. I don't need to make any
Oh,
presentation.
well, will you look after the trees?
But we know Tony. He's been at all the open houses, so we'll be speaking to him, I'm sure about that.
I didn't hear, yes, we'll look after the trees.
Of course.
All right. Another good answer, I think.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much for being here.
If there's any questions.
Councillor Adams?
I actually don't really have a question. I just want to thank you for your efforts in going through the process. I know there were a number of changes that you made as a result of the discussion with neighbors, so I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Appreciate the commitment about the trees. Thank you. Councillor Adams, is that you getting ready to move this?
If there are no others, if you'll poll the audience, I don't think there are, but if you double check, I'd appreciate that.
I think we're right this time. There aren't any.
Okay.
If you get a motion on the floor, there might be one, though.
Well, I will move it. And if I could just say a couple of things. First of all, I wanted to thank our staff and the applicant for working well together on the matter. The site has a really long history, and it's interesting that we're having this discussion the same night that we had the discussion about the St. Anne's site. Both of them have some similarities with respect to Catholic board sites going surplus. This site, as I said, has a really long history, going back more than a decade now, I believe, when the Halton Catholic District School Board fought to get the land from the developer in a long, heavily debated battle over how much it should cost and when they should have to buy it and stuff. And they finally did get it, and there was failure to get the capital funds required to build the school despite many years of asking, to the point where the changes in demographics in the area came about to the point where they declared it surplus. That's the history on the site. And there are people in the neighborhood who are disappointed that there is not a school here. And there are others who are relieved that there will not be a school here generating traffic on their local street. So it goes both ways. However, we are where we are, and I think that we've got to a place where we have generally good compatibility between the existing homes and what's being proposed on the back of each of them. It's never perfectly exactly the same thing, but it's generally pretty close to like. And on the walkway, as I discussed with Tony earlier, it does now play an important functional role in the water system, and as well as the pedestrian functionality that comes with it. So I thank everybody for the efforts on both sides to get us to a reasonably good landing for the neighborhood.
Anyone else? All those in favor? Opposed, if any, and that's carried. Discussion item number 7 is a recommendation meeting report for a zoning bylaw amendment for DeCarlo Homes at 2136 and 2148 Trafalgar Road. And Trish Carlingwood is here to reprise the report you all have studied so closely. And we have an indication of 2 or 3 delegations. Trish?
Thank you, Mayor Burton. The report for tonight can be found on page 381 of tonight's agenda. The purpose of this report is to provide a full staff review of the application and recommendation on the proposed zoning bylaw amendment application. As noted by my report, staff are recommending approval of the application tonight. The property is located at 2136 and 2148 Trafalgar Road. The subject site comprises an area of approximately 0.84 hectares and fronts onto both Trafalgar Road and Lillican Street. The property is ideally situated adjacent to Trafalgar Road, which is planned as a multimodal transportation corridor. The subject lands are made up of 2 properties. There is a detached dwelling on the northern property and 2 buildings that were part of the Wagaway dog kennel business. The effect of the proposed amendment would be to rezone the lands from existing development to mixed use 2 to permit a total of 59 4-story townhouse dwellings consistent with the zoning in effect for the property to the north, which is known as the Dunbar development. The proposed development has been designed to complement the built form and setbacks approved on the adjacent Dunbar property. The blocks of townhomes are oriented similar to the Dunbar blocks, maintaining consistent setbacks and distances between structures so that the proposed units will generally align with the Dunbar blocks of townhomes. Vehicle access is proposed from Lillican Street, and pedestrian access to Trafalgar Road is provided through the site. This conceptual plan illustrates the uses and facilities proposed. Orange is used to identify the blocks of townhouses. Gray identifies the visitor parking. Yellow is for the sidewalks and walkway. You can see the walkway at the top of the plan as it goes through the townhouses to Trafalgar Road. And then there is the green spaces and the roads. The Dunbar site and the subject application have taken into consideration the possibility of pedestrian connections to one another. Staff have assessed the options through the detailed grading plans and confirmed that the connections will only be made possible should stairs be built at the identified locations. The future connection of the properties will be a decision made by the respective condominium boards. Each unit will include 2 parking spaces, and in addition, visitor parking is provided consistent with the parking rate approved for the Dunbar development and the parking provisions in the in-zone bylaw. Matters raised through the technical review of the file and the input gathered from residents in the area include a conformity review of policy documents, concluded that while the existing use permissions for the dog kennel and the single detached bungalow do not contravene the intent of any planning policy documents, the proposed zoning bylaw would have the effect of implementing the policies of the Livable Oakville Plan and the Region Official Plan in a manner consistent with the provincial policy statement and in conformity with the 2017 growth plan. Staff from the region and the town have reviewed the transportation impact study, and in consideration of the Livable Oakville policies, when looking at the proposed vehicle access with regards to arterial roads and the provision of transit and active transportation, and staff concluded that the recommended access is to be from Lillican Street. I'd also like to note that Lillican Street was planned with the potential for vehicle access from these sites along Trafalgar Road as identified in the Biddington subdivision agreement. The transportation impact study concludes that traffic generated by the proposed development can be accommodated on the existing road network. The proposed density and forecasted trips generated from the recent development of the Biddington subdivision, the Dunbar development, and the subject application have been accommodated for in the planning for road infrastructure and municipal servicing in the area. With regards to the placement of height along Lillican Street and the transition to the existing 2-story homes, the proposal is consistent with the Livable Oakville official plan height permissions for the Main Street 2 designation and is considered an appropriate transition of built form. Lillican Street provides a separation distance between the uses and the heights of the proposed development and the existing detached homes. The Dunbar development and heights of townhouses along Lillican Street are viewed from an urban design perspective as compatible with the single detached homes. It is anticipated that the majority of the trees will be removed due to the subject land's development to allow for planned densities on the site. A tree canopy target of 20% will be implemented at the site plan approval stage. At the public meeting in September 2017, staff took note that there were concerns the site may need additional visitor parking. At that point, than the application originally proposed. Staff have advised the applicant that a parking ratio consistent with the Dunbar development and the parent zoning bylaw is required. The lands are designated Main Street 2 on Schedule I of Central Land Use Figure. The Main Street schedule designation is intended to provide for mixed-use development that is transit supportive. The subject lands fall within the Trafalgar Road Corridor Planning Study Area that was completed in 2014 and implemented in the Livable Oakville Plan. The purpose of the study was to evaluate and recommend intensification opportunities as well as the appropriate densities, built form, and mixed use of land uses along the Trafalgar Road Corridor to provide for transit supportive development which supports and creates an urban connection between the uptown core and Midtown Oakville. It was determined that a mixed-use designation with building heights ranging between 4 and 6 stories were appropriate permissions for the lands along Trafalgar Road, with additional permissions for a height limit minimum of 2 stories along Lillican Street. The lands are zoned existing development. The proposed zoning bylaw is required to permit development on the site. In addition to establishing the mixed-use 2 zoning for the site with setbacks, height permissions, and parking ratios, Bylaw 2018-056 includes an H holding provision until such time as a record of site condition is acknowledged by the Ministry of Environment, and such time the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry confirms the absence of any species at risk on the site. Staff are of the opinion that the proposed zoning bylaw is appropriate as it implements the planning and design objectives of the Livable Oakville Plan. I already went through that. In conclusion, staff put forward the following recommendation as shown for Council's consideration, that in accordance with Section 3417 of the Planning Act, no further notice is determined to be necessary, that the zoning bylaw application by DeCarlo Homes be approved on the basis that it is consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms to all provincial plans, the Region of Halton official plan, and the Livable Oakville official plan, and has regards for matters of provincial interest. That bylaw 2018-056 be passed, and that notice of Council's decision reflect that Council has fully considered all the written and oral submissions relating to this matter, and that those comments have been appropriately addressed. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do have some registered delegations. Before that, we have some questions from councillors. Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple questions. First of all, with respect to the visitor parking issue, I'm sorry this is like becoming a broken record. You get North Oakville councillors, and this is what we talk about, but the visitor parking reduction concerns me. I know that you are recommending it based on what I'm going to call a mistake we probably made in allowing the reduction on Dunbar. And I mistake that council made. I'm not suggesting staff made the mistake. Is there any other justification for the reduction in the visitor parking allocation other than the precedent? Because based on everything that you've been hearing from us and from the community about this issue, I'm surprised that we'd be allowing or we'd be recommending a reduction in visitor parking.
Through you, Councillor Giddings. The parent bylaw recommends a parking rate in a mixed-use zone of 1.5 parking spaces per unit, and DeCarlo is providing 2 spaces per unit. So we're going above and beyond there. DeCarlo originally came in with a 0.15 recommended parking ratio. We are recommending 0.2 in the bylaws. So we're going up to 0.2. And 0.2 is the visitor parking rate for townhouses in a mixed-use zone. So we're maintaining, whereas Dunbar at the time, before the bylaw was updated, Dunbar was a different ratio that went through the board. This ratio is consistent with what we have in 2014 now.
Okay, so I'm not meaning to be argumentative. I just want to understand. The chart on page 391 talks about the fact that the 2014 regulation is 0.025 visitor parking spaces per dwelling, yet the proposed is 0.2. So I understand the fact that that they're proposing to overbuild the unit spaces, but why? I don't understand what you just told me, that it's consistent with the current standard, if the current standard is the 2014 standard.
I believe that is an error in my report. When I went back and looked through the mixed-use parking provisions for visitor parking, when you provide more than 5 spaces for a site, that the 0.2 is the current parking ratio, not 0.25. That's for a different use. So 0.2 is the current parking ratio for townhouses in a mixed-use zone versus a residential zone.
So on that basis, then they're complying with that aspect of the regulation.
Through you, Councillor Giddings, they are complying to that regulation, and then their site plan will need to be updated to reflect the addition of a couple more visitor parking spaces.
Okay. We've talked, you and I have talked, and we've talked amongst the community and amongst staff and councillors about this connection, potential connection to Dunbar site to create more, I guess, contiguous connection through the sites. And I see in the report you're referring to the steps, and that can be decided later by the condo corporation. Why can't we compel that connection? And the reason, and to frame it this way, I doubt that a condo corporation, once it's constituted, is going to go to the capital cost of making that connection. I would find it highly unusual, having had experience dealing with condo corporations once they become constituted. So I find it highly unlikely. Do we have any ability to be able to compel that connection?
Through you, Councillor Giddings, and I may need some help answering this one, but we have talked to both the Dunbar Condo Board as well as the applicant for tonight's application, and the status of the wish to connect has been left to the condo boards, and understanding that it would not be meeting AODA requirements to put in stairs was something that town staff were not comfortable with.
Okay. With respect to, just in summary then, in terms of, so this is a 59-unit proposal, and I'm just recapping for my own information, just to make sure I have everything clear. This is a 59-unit proposal. The biggest piece of this proposal is the changes, I guess, in the massing, essentially, correct? Because we're not requiring the minimum number or the maximum. Let me get back to my chart. Sorry, I flipped past my chart. I had here, there, the chart you gave me. 391, thank you. There it is, yeah. So the maximum number of stories before was 6, and they're now proposing 4. So basically the nut of this is that instead of going up, they're going wide and filling more of the site, essentially, correct? Is that my understanding?
Through you, Councillor Giddings, the special provision that was provided through the Trafalgar Rail Corridor study looked at providing the mixed-use 2 zone on this, designation in the official plan on these properties, which allows between 4 and 6 stories. When the Dunbar application came in, we looked at the transition of uses towards the Lillykin properties, and it was understood that to provide the more transition, we would look at the 2 to 4 stories on Lillykin and not going up beyond that too far towards the Trafalgar to allow that for that transition. So yes, to answer your question, instead of going up higher, they are expanding to fill the site. They could generally fill the site if they wanted to put a 6-story apartment with underground parking. They could do the exact same with very similar setbacks as well. However, they're choosing to stick with a lower townhouse form.
Okay, so in my circuitous way, now I'm going to get to the main question, and that is that the density or the number of units on the site are essentially as of right. Is that accurate? Based on the existing zoning, the existing secondary plan conditions on the site, 59 units would be allowed, notwithstanding the height or the width of the property or the units, correct?
Through you, Councillor Giddings, through the mixed use, Main Street 2 zone designation and the mixed use 2, which they are asking for, we go by height, not density. And yes, they are permitted as of right.
So really, at the end of the day, this application really isn't about the number of units, it's about the other issues that have been identified in the report.
Correct.
And so if we were to reject this today, they could simply come back, rejig it as a different orientation, meet as of right, but still have the same number of units, correct?
Correct.
Could they have more?
If they, through you, Councillor Giddings, should they choose to go up in height and look at smaller units, yes, they could have more, as long as they stay within the height permissions.
Right, okay. And I want to reemphasize, I want to clarify something you said earlier. So when Lillican was built and Biddington was approved, the approvals were all predicated on these sites being developed, correct?
The approvals for the Biddington subdivision, I think, went through in 2013, the subdivision agreement, which was prior to, or just around the time that the Dunbar pre-application came into the town. And at that time, when the subdivision agreement was being put together and conditions of draft plan subdivision were done, there are clauses and warning clauses in that agreement that specifically state the access for these Trafalgar properties will be off of, or may be off of Lillican.
Whose warning clauses in which subdivision? The
They're
Biddington?
in the Biddington subdivision agreement.
And was there ever contemplation in any of that, in any of those approvals, that there would be any form of access, whether it be restricted access or full moves access off of Dundas? Was that always off the table?
Through you, Councillor Giddings, off of Trafalgar, there was no mention of access off of Trafalgar. However, when we did the Trafalgar Road Corridor study, the region was fairly insistent that no access be provided off of Trafalgar for these properties. We did go back, because the residents brought it up as a concern, we did go back and speak to the region, and it was still off the table.
Even limited access, limited right outs, right in, right out, no?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Knoll. Councillor Elder.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I wonder what is the current canopy cover of this site? And how many trees are actually going to be cut?
Through you, Councillor Giddings, I am not aware of the existing canopy coverage. That is something I can find out for you, but it's not something we've looked at. And I believe, I don't want to speak out of turn.
Knowing the site, would you say it's about 80% tree canopy cover now?
I would be a really poor judge of that.
Okay, we can go to Google Earth, you can get a pretty good quick look at it.
I can take a look at that.
It's at minimum 80% covered. So when we did the tree report, did it state how many trees were going to be cut?
Through you, Councillor Giddings, if I could maybe ask the applicant, because it is not coming to me at the top of my head.
Okay.
How many trees are on the site?
Sorry,
I'm seeing that we're going to have to look into that and get back to you. I want to say I know there's at least 3 or 4 border trees with Dunbar. I have had a resident connect with me about one of the trees that's on the site, but I don't know the exact number. I apologize.
Okay. Now another question would be, when the site would be when they would be doing the cutting of the trees, do we have anything in that it could not be doing during bird nesting season? Is that part of what we put in place?
Through you, Councillor Giddings, that would come through the site plan application process, and that would definitely be something that, Conservation Halton or the region, as well as ourselves, would be looking at.
So this would come to site plan before there's any cleaning of any trees off the property?
Correct.
Okay. Very good. So that's where it might be covered at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and this is what I guess upsets the residents that have 5 trees in their yard that they want to cut. And when they look at that property like this and you see there's tons of trees in there. So that's the bit of a complaint people have. I thank you.
Any other questions from council? Would someone like to make a motion to go past the hour? We're getting close. Councillor Knoll, all in favor? Looks like this side's in favor. Could I see hands over here? And that's carried. I'm sorry?
Did we carry it?
Yeah,
To
that's
go
on
past
that.
10?
That's on that.
This is just to go past 10. So we
I
don't
know,
need
but
to-
that's on that. Councillor Grant.
Just quickly, when we're talking about sales agreements, I know for a fact that the kennel was mentioned in the sales agreement for people buying in the area. Was something along this line envisioned in that sales agreement as well, would you know?
Through you, Councillor Giddings, it wasn't specific to the type of development that would happen along Trafalgar. It just mentions the redevelopment of the properties along Trafalgar may have access onto Lillican.
So that was in the sales agreement of anybody who'd bought in the area?
I have not specifically seen the sales agreement. I just know in the subdivision agreement under the clauses, it does mention it.
Okay, thank you.
Looks like we've exhausted the questions. Madam Clerk, do we have some delegations?
Our first delegation is Lucy Papaloni.
Good evening, Your Worship.
Welcome.
And councillors. My name is Lucy Papaloni. I'm a resident of Littlekin Street, and I vehemently oppose the additional construction of the proposed 59 four-story homes for many reasons. One of them is the increased traffic and congestion on a very narrow residential street. If you measure the street of Lillican, it's quite much more narrow than other streets in Oakville. Increased noise with hundreds of additional people. They built 112 Dunbar townhomes on that property, and it was not in the original agreement. The increased traffic poses a danger to young children. I have newly arrived children from CAS. We are in the process of adoption. There is increased pollution. The proposed townhomes block the light if they are 4 stories. Our homes are only 2 stories. They will block the light and view from my home, thus traumatizing my children even further than they've already been. I've purchased my home in 2013. At the time, I was told there would be 52 homes in the development. My husband and I moved in. We were excited to move in into a quiet Oakville neighborhood, only to discover 1 year later that there would be hundreds of townhomes. We chose this area because of its convenience, easy access to highways, as we both work in nearby cities. It was once a quiet residential area. We are in the process, as I mentioned, of adopting. We chose Oakville and thought it would be a nice, quiet town to raise children. We moved from Toronto, specifically, to Oakville to raise our family. We move in and we are one of the first residents. We work around the construction that has been going on for 4 years and now still not fully complete. A year passes and then we see a construction hut for the Dunbar homes, stating that they're building townhomes. Fine. Hundreds of townhomes, not a few, hundreds. In 2016, both my children, 7 and 4 at the time, move in. They have been in foster care for 3.5 years. They are victims of abuse and trauma. The eldest has been through 5 foster homes, 5 schools. She does not require additional stress and trauma. At the end of the street, there are multiple townhomes, which causes more traffic, increased noise. Children are not used to a lot of noise or traffic. They came from a quiet area of the province, and they now hear constant zooming of cars in the middle of the night to the townhomes. There is only one way out of the development, as mentioned earlier. There is no access on Trafalgar to the people's townhomes. The children cannot sleep because of the noise coming through right in front of the homes, zooming more than once. I still haven't caught the license plate of the person. Now the city plans to build additional properties right in front of the windows where my children sleep. They block the light. There will be more shadows, more noise, more lights, double traffic, more than doubled. Your actual study shows 300%. There are only 52 homes, now hundreds of townhomes, and potentially more. We have to endure construction for another 3 to 4 years. My children can no longer play outside or ride their bikes because there's too many cars and too many people. It will not be safe. There are multiple homes being built north of Dundas and Oakville. There are plenty of homes on MLS. From your study here, it indicates that single-use residential buildings may be permitted within the Main Street 2 designation. Why was that not considered? It also says that there need to be in the character of the homes that are currently there. Well, the homes are 2 stories. It says they could be 2 to 4 stories. They've chosen 4 stories. I thought the goal was to make Oakville livable. I believe we are failing miserably. I'd like to keep town in the town of Oakville, and I noticed the mayor stepped out. He likes that expression, so do I. That's why I bought in Oakville. Traffic is horrific. What takes 21 minutes from Oakville to get to my job on a Sunday takes well over an hour because of the traffic. It's a wonderful thing that we are creating more homes for people. Where is the infrastructure to support this? It is not present. And now, right in front of my own door, it isn't present. I won't be able to back out of my driveway to get my kids to school in the morning because there'll be too many cars coming by. That's not what I signed up for. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from council? No, Madam Clerk?
Next delegation is Zia Malik.
Good evening, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and the respective councillors. It was, Lucy has expressed very well several of the points. We had these points similar covered in October 2017 in a letter, and that was a post last meeting which happened. We have that letter here now, and we'll go through some of these points. But before I go on to that letter, I would like to touch some points which came up through the city presentation and which I noticed today also. And one important point, it's the physical context as mentioned on page 12. The subject property is located along the Trafalgar Road corridor between Glen Ashton Drive and River Oaks Boulevard, with vehicular access from Lilicon Street. That's not adequate and correct statement. The scenario is this, that the Lilicon Street connects onto Namron Gate, and Namron Gate connects to the River Oaks Boulevard East. And the Namron Gate has only 4 houses on one side and 4 on the other side. This street is the real connection to the entire community. So that's the bottleneck. If we say if there is a bottle, the rest, Lilicon and other streets, and the new development from the next builder, the townhomes, etc., they are at the rear, and the Glen Ashton, there is no access. So these 4 houses and this street, that's the real bottleneck. And the cars are zooming there. And so this is just a correction. Why this has not been mentioned in the city report? It looks to me it's deliberately ignored. Anyhow, that's a comment just to start. I think all this city report has to be revised. I would now like to move on to our previous community report, which we submitted in October 2017. And it's about 15 pages. We'll try to go through it quickly as possible. And there are majority of the residents of the 52 state homes, they have also signed on this since long. Now, the first one, so this is correct. Okay. So this one, as mentioned in the previous presentation, I will show this picture. This is the sold out from Biddington Homes for the 52 estate homes. And this was the initial impression given to everybody that it's going to be 52 estate homes in this community. Then came up these multi-stories and 112, etc., and then another 40 some units. So all these are already approved, and they contributed about 300% increase, 300% increase. Now, the question here is on this new proposal, this came up in 2017, and this is asking for another more than 100. So the increase goes on to almost 400% with this. Now, I will touch base on some of these quickly here. This is now, we have here notice of proposed zoning bylaw amendment. This is, I just said 2017 it came up. I have a photograph here. This is Lillican North New Biddington Townhome site and building north of Glen Ashton, which is further, it is still not their contribution. And in the previous contribution, you have seen how much stress is on Lillican. And Namron Gate, which is the bottleneck, is not even mentioned yet. It's going to be a terrible accident and the zooming cars going up, et cetera, et cetera. It's a terrible situation we are going to face on this. Okay, now here, please have it there. These are some of the photographs for Lillican Street and proposed Di Carlo 59 4th story. It was just mentioned here, it's a quite green and there are plenty of trees there. It was just mentioned. If you look at this one, you know, this is the scene there. This is on the, this is the one. It's just on the roadside, and the inside there are a lot of trees. So all this is going to be demolished and congested. This is the only road, Lillican, which will have a lot of traffic and accidents and God knows what's going to happen there. Can we have the next one? Yeah. This is picture 14. Here is fourth-story townhomes on Lillican Street, already built. This is another picture here, which already built, same. And this is the inside here. You know, this one, the fourth one. Yeah. Now, this is the inside, actually. Once the green space is gone, trees, and this is the parking and all that, this is all built area. It's a terrible look when you move inside. Next, please. This is, again, some of the inners, and this is Trafalgar. It's only to see, but the entire traffic is on the Lillican, and the next street, and then the bottleneck on Namron. These are quick several of the existing photographs. Now we move on to the next part. Here, Biddington, then, when they finished the 52 lots, they came up with this on the same board. They displayed, okay, they have now the new community coming up, another 40 townhomes or combination or whatsoever. They have here, same thing, same. It's approved, it's going to go. But the effect of these, the contribution from these 40, 50 houses, townhouses, it's not yet onto the streets. And streets are already occupied and all that. So this is another example here, how this is going to be occupied. And let's move on to the next. This is again same. This will be occupied. This building is on the Glen Ashton, and there is no access to Glen Ashton, and all this will be contributing a lot of traffic and congestion onto Lilican and then Namron Gate, and the only exit is on the River Oaks Boulevard. Can we have the next one?
Sir, I just want to mention, you have 1 minute left. Each delegation has 2 minutes. So
Okay.
if you'd like to get your pertinent points across.
Okay, so now here, to summarize all this, we have here the signatures done in last year. These people, they signed. There is another, almost all the 52 homeowners, they have signed this petition, and that's what it is. And now, before I close my presentation, let's look at this one. This is the proposal, and these are all 50 feet houses here, and the rest congestion, it's going, and here is the bottleneck, you know. Yeah, this is the one.
All right. Thank you very much.
So this is the, thank you.
Well, thank you. See if there are any questions from council for you.
Okay.
Seeing none, Madam Clerk, we have another delegation.
Our last listed delegation is Diana Valsic on behalf of DeCarlo Homes.
Good evening, councillors, staff, and the public. My name is Diana Vlasic, and I work at Metropolitan Consulting, and I'm a planner here on behalf of the owners, DeCarlo Homes. I'm here to say that we support staff's recommendation. We've worked with them for a number of years to develop this plan where they can support the zoning bylaw amendment, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you. You have one from Councillor Eller.
I think you know what the question is going to be. It's what is the current tree canopy on the properties right now?
That was raised on a meeting that we had with staff prior to this report being written. I don't know offhand. That is something that the landscape architect is looking at, and part of the site plan approval, we're going to make sure that we cover that target of 20% for the tree canopy cover plan.
Yeah, you're going to cover 20% in 50 years, but what I'm asking for is the current tree canopy, just so, because people are starting to get concerned when they see other people are trying to cut a tree and they can't, and yet, you know, I know a development application is in, but it looks like you can cut a few hundred trees in less than a 2-acre site, basically.
Yeah.
I know you can do it, and I just wanted the information.
That is something I'd have to look into with staff. I don't have that answer right now. I apologize.
Now, the other thing I'd like to know, can you confirm that you would never cut those trees during a bird breeding season?
Correct. That is actually part of the species at risk assessment.
Thank goodness. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Grant.
This may come off as an odd question, but it was asked by a person living in the area. You can choose to answer it or not, but as you represent the owners of the property, why aren't you just building a single detached dwelling on that property?
They did review, like, when they bought the lands, I'm sure they looked at, as of right, what they're allowed. And we did look at, you know, the different studies done by the region and, you know, the Trafalgar Road corridor, et cetera. And we do comply with the neighboring property as well.
Essentially, you're following all the regulations that have been set in place for the zoning?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions for our delegation? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sir, did you want to come forward? Yes. By all means. If you could go up to the microphone and give your name for the clerk.
Thank you very much for having me here.
And your name, sir?
My name is Janusz Brezek.
Not Dad.
Well, yes, I'm that, yes. And I live on the other side in this subdivision on 2126 Vineland Crescent. And as this lady mentioned, it will be very pleasant if we could use this sketch which lady presented so I could explain how the chaos is already being created. But going back, when we were buying our houses, we were assured this is estate houses. I paid over $11,000 in taxes. I believe the other people as well. We moved there, we were assured it will be nice and quiet community, detached houses. We were very upset when we found out that Dunbar project going on. And then is already approved by Biddington and other homes, and all this traffic, as my colleagues mentioned, going through one small Namron gate. There is no access, and there won't be. I wouldn't mind if they had access to Trafalgar, but unfortunately it's impossible. Today we heard a lot about improving traffic and so on, so on. But this particular case saying that is being create another ghetto, because this is already ghetto. I don't have kids in school age, but I see young families, and I am concerned because especially on Lyrican Street, so often, even though I am on the opposite side, I see cars running very fast on the other side. I can hear from my side. And this is like my colleague said, is just one small street connecting to River Oaks. There is no other connections. 52 houses detached, every house at least 2 cars. Dunbar, 110 units, times 2 is 200, over 220 cars. And then another 50, but Biddington has already approved for another townhomes, and all this traffic will be connected through one small street. I see this gentleman who lives just on the corner, River Oaks and Namron Gate. I feel sorry for him, seeing so many times when he or whoever is parking on his driveway can even move, because cars are passing. They cannot go. Never mind, there is 2 churches beside Trafalgar, is Croatian church and Ukrainian church. When the Sunday comes and some other holidays, all parking on the inside, people are parking. And we are talking about also parking and other parkings like visitors parking. It's already chaos. It's not something like we were told we will have nice and quiet life. Not anymore. And those kids, they are playing, they try to play. Right now, I've seen on my side, on Vineland, they move a little farther, and I don't know where they're gonna go. Sometimes they were playing. And these streets, the round, the circle, Vineland and Lillykins, they seems to be narrower than the other street in other development. I understand is everything connected with the money, because everything is costly. So those lots and everything are smaller and smaller, and we are building higher and higher. It's understandable, but that's not what we were expecting, and we really appreciate you guys to consider, because it's, like I said before, it's already created ghetto. I believe it's not intention of you guys to create another one. So that's why I strongly oppose, even though I don't have kids in school age, but it's very hard to get out on Trafalgar in rush hours. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. You've elicited a number of questions. Councillor Knoll?
Thank you. Just first a comment. I hardly believe that homes that are valued at $800,000 plus are currently or ever will be a ghetto, but that's...
This one? No, it wasn't below million.
They're not ghettos, sir. I reject that as one of the councillors in the area. But my question for you is this: you've made it very clear that you were promised a certain lifestyle in that community. Who made that promise to you?
When we were buying, agent from real estate agent who was selling the houses.
So it was the developer that made the commitment to you?
Yeah, developer is representative, like lady who represented, and we were not even one word was said about another planning development.
Right. Did you at any point talk to the town staff or ward councillors or anything to get better clarity what was going to happen in the area?
No. We believe we were buying our home through our agent, and there was between our agent and the developer, Biddington.
This is a fundamental problem, in particularly North Oakville and new greenfield developments, is that you often have salespeople that will tell you what you want to hear in order to sell the property. I clarified with our staff earlier what the as of right on those properties were. Did you hear that conversation about what could be built on that property by their rights, by the owner's rights?
Well, yes, I heard, but you know, I don't know how is going to be with this huge traffic with the cars and everything.
I don't discount any of your concerns, sir. I'm trying to ascertain. Do you understand the implications of the conversation I had with Ms. Collingwood earlier in terms of the number of units?
Yes, yeah.
And that the potential of us turning this down could actually result in an even worse scenario for you. You could have more units.
Well, yes, it will be even worse than it is right now, of course.
Right. So our conundrum that we face as a council is that we can either approve it as is based on what we see, or we can potentially reject it, fight it out, and end up with something even more congested than what you're being proposed with now. Do you understand that implication?
That's I just strongly oppose.
Okay,
just against this project at all.
Yeah.
I don't see the way to put more traffic and more cars unless there is access to Trafalgar on the other side. Yes.
Yeah,
well, if there is access on Trafalgar, no problem.
Yes.
I don't see. I already addressed my concern about the Dunbar, but you know. It seems to be nobody listen. Traffic is flowing through our area, and I don't know how the process is. You know, I've been living in this country for 31 years. 3 years I spent under communist government. And you know what? Some decision, I don't want to comment on that because I see big similarity.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Sir, I think Councillor Grant has a question for you as well.
Come on back down for a sec. And Councillor Knowles covered most of my concerns about saying you were assured of things.
Yes.
But you mentioned the dog park.
Yes.
And that's where I have to wonder, when you were sold this home, did you talk to your real estate agent? Did they walk through all the security clauses and everything with you?
Well, I bought in the first stage my house. It was probably 2013 or 2012.
Right.
We moved last year, even though our closing was in 2014.
Okay.
It was one of the first stages.
But again, in the clauses in your sales agreement, it was mentioned that there was a dog park there. And I know that several people in the community wanted that dog park gone, although we'd warned once the dog park gets sold, something else might take its place you don't like. And that's, I'm just wondering if your real estate agent walked you through everything, you should have been told.
No, we were not told.
Well, they should have told you about the dog park, because I know for a fact that was in there. And they should have told you about the development that was happening around you, because this was never planned to be just the estate homes. It was always planned to be this community.
Well, that's what we were told. Estate homes, nothing else.
Okay.
And that's why we decided to buy. Otherwise, we wouldn't buy a house
And
there.
as Councillor Knowles said, unfortunately, that's what happens. These salespeople go a little off script and start trying to sell what they can. But the thing is that, you see, everybody wanted to get rid of the dog park, you understand. Now this development has come. You understand if we say no to this development, we may be moving up the levels of something worse.
Yeah, but the thing is, like you guys mentioned also about the trees. I've seen today already the trees, one of the trees hanging on the
A
fence. On
contractor
really
can remove as many trees as they want to
Yeah.
purchase or put up a development, as long as they replace a certain amount of trees and then put money towards different things in the community.
Mhm.
So unfortunately, that's not here or there. It's private property owned by these people. They can do what they wish. I'm just trying to caution you that if we
Yeah.
start trying to...
Mr. Chair,
But
I'm
yes.
sorry, on a
Sorry,
point
yes,
of order,
yes.
I think we're getting into cross
I
debate
know.
here.
Yes,
I understand this is private property, so but is I believe up to somebody who approved this development, even though people.
I understand.
We
that.
just address our concern. We just address our concern.
I apologize. And also thank you, Councillor Dove. It must be the hour. I'm getting a little flaky.
Thank you.
Councillor Elgar, can you?
Come on back down just for a quick moment, sir.
Oh, what?
I'll be quick. What you're experiencing, we've experienced, this council has experienced over the years, and we've tried everything we can to change it. I know staff have written in the sales trailers, there has to be signs hung showing what's going to go with proposed densities. When you went to the sales trailer, did you see a sign? Because I know staff, everybody's worked so hard to try to make people aware of what they're buying. Was there a sign in there that you noticed?
We were buying, I don't believe it was trailer, we were buying somewhere in downtown Oakville where they had office.
Okay, but there was an office?
They still have office, I'm talking about Biddington, they have office downtown Oakville. I'm not really sure if there was a I'm sorry, there was a trailer, yes, it was at front on the corner, but yeah, 2013.
Anyway, that's
Yeah.
like we've tried. It's so hard to make people aware of what's potentially could happen, and with the town staff and the council has pushed hard to get signs up in the trailers wherever the sales pavilions are, so people at least have an idea. So,
No, but also, like I said, I just addressed my concern about the safety, about the traffic congestion, which I heard before here on this town hall today, how to improve the traffic. So in some areas it's being improved, in the other areas, like our area, is being create more congestion.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Councillor Elgar, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
We're about to time out here, and so we need a motion to waive procedural bylaw. And there are 9 at council remaining. So, Madam Clerk, that will have to be unanimous.
Can I just ask, can you poll to see if there's any audience members left first before we?
Well, we're going to be over soon unless we...
But I'm saying if nobody else wants to speak, there's no other speakers who might be able to.
Are there any other speakers on this item?
No, Jesus Christ. Let's just get this done.
We've already received your comments, and we appreciate that. Oh, great. Look what I did now. Mr. Mayor, we're about to waive procedure. The clock is ticking, so
I move we waive procedure.
Councillor Knoll has moved that we waive procedure.
For how long?
For half an hour.
Max.
So all in favor, and hold your hands up. We are 1 shy of going past the hour.
Okay.
So, Madam Clerk, if I could ask Commissioner Closier, are there any items in Heritage Committee that will time out? Councillor Duddick has a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd be pleased to give you a motion for the advisory committee minutes, along with the notice number 10, intention to demolish for Lynbrook. And I believe your...
Does that include the deferral?
Correct.
For
There's a
328
deferral.
Sumner to
Correct.
April 16th?
Thank you.
I'm sorry, until May 14th? Thank you. Mr. Mayor.
So there's not unanimous consent to defer that?
Okay,
So-
can we deal with the other then?
The minutes, sure.
Okay.
Oh, wait a minute, what's going on?
But-
I thought the minutes had...
So I oppose the deferral, and I'd like to debate the deferral. If we can't go past the hour, we'll have to put that item
Okay.
over.
What's he doing?
Isn't that not in the...
Deferral takes precedence.
Well, any
here.
second now, we
What
won't
do you mean
be able
we've
to
gotta
do the minutes.
discuss it?
Okay, so can I? Then, Mr. Chair, I will deal with the one on Lynbrook solely, okay?
So the receipt of the minutes and
No, because the receipt of the minutes for, the receipt of the minutes, yes, but the deferral is another issue.
so that would be item 10.
Correct.
So all those in favor? And that is carried.
So
And we,
separated the Sumner item.
and we have before us the deferral.
So, you don't have time. You're out of time.
Mr. Chair, we're done.
Mr. Chair?
We do have time for items 8, 9, and the,
Can we move this to council?
oh, can we move those to our next scheduled meeting of council?
It's 10:30.
So moved.
So moved.
And that is moved. Any outstanding? We have.
Mr. Chair? I'm
Councilor Noel?
concerned about item 7. Do we not need to defer item 7 to the next meeting of council as well? Thank you. I'll move the deferral of item 7 to the next available council meeting.
All in favor? And that is carried.
How are we doing business after the hour when we voted not to go past the hour?
No,
It's not,
How
it's
does that
10:30
happen?
right now.
Do we
It's
not?
10:30 now.
It's just 10:30.
It's
Your clock
just
is fast.
10:30. Madam Clerk, has everything been covered?
It's like a rubber clock.
All right, so
I think
we're going to
for
rise
30
to
minutes, we
report.
could have dispatched everything.
We didn't do,
Shouldn't go. We had to go.
You didn't declare the meeting
Yes,
adjourned.
this is wrong.
Are we adjourned? Oh.
We're illegal. Well, happy, won't be this week.
all right, council, before we adjourn, well, we are adjourned. We are recessing until we can find a suitable time to cover the remaining items.
Let the people for 7 know that we haven't made a decision, then they will advise them. The clerks will notify you.
We will follow, it's a process, we'll follow the process. If we can't vote to extend the hour, then the bylaw prevails.